Members that I know are hoping to join online, and we will get to them at a roll call vote. I just want to double check that we do have some on. Okay, we have at least one, and we'll keep eyes out for those who do not respond to the roll call. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order with a roll call vote, and we will begin with Member Bogus. Not here. We'll keep an eye out online. Member Bollinger. Here. Member Booth.
Here.
Member Brinton. Is she in the building? I heard she was in the building.
I believe she's driving home now.
Okay, so we'll check online and make sure, see if she just joined. Member Brinton, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, we'll count that as here. Perfect. Member Davis? Member Earl? Member Green?
Here.
Member Hall? Member Earl?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart?
Yes. Yep.
I'm here. Member Kelly? We understand that you're on, but you're muted, so whenever you get to it, Member Kelly, if you can hear this, let us know that you're here. Member Carey? Here. Member Lear? Yes. Member Reel? Yes. Vice Chair Wood?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, board members. With that, we will begin with agenda item, I believe it's agenda item 5.
Vice Chair Kelly, or sorry, Board Member Kelly's here. Sorry, I missed your roll call.
Yep, finance is over, Vice Chair. We got you, though. I'm just kidding. I shouldn't have done that. Okay.
I was a Freudian slip, I guess.
Thank you, Member Kelly. We're happy to have you here. Let's move on to agenda item 5, Utah School for the Deaf and Blind board meeting. And we'll turn time over to, it looks like Superintendent Coleman.
Thank you. Today we have with us some of our awesome students who are going to share one of their recent experiences with the board. And so, Dr. Tanner, do you want to just kind of take over and drive this?
Yep. We're going to probably just sit a little differently just for communication access. So yeah. We have a student that might be showing up a little bit late. He may need to take your seat so he can see the interpreter. He's deafblind. So anyway, if you don't mind, we're gonna scooch up there. Where do you want to be? I would like to sit where Sybil's seat is so I can see the children close. And they're going to come up behind you.
Test.
Can you, all right. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to quickly, in the interest of time, I'm going to introduce the students so you can see them real quickly. Right here, closest to me, is Eliza Dietz. She's a junior at our JMS campus. Next to her is Jackson Fowler. Jackson Fowler is a mainstream student that attends Olympus, and he's a senior, graduating this year. Next to him is Kayla Budge. She attends at KBS, our Ogden campus, and she is a junior. And then right here is Jenna. This is Jenna. Jenna is at KBS, and she is also a junior that's here. We have another student that's coming. His name's Maro. He wanted to get dressed in his kimono, and I think it's made him a little late. But he might be coming, and he will be joining them. He is a senior, and he's at JMS. So with that, we're going to let them go ahead and tell you their experience and how it's going. We'll need the mic. Have you got that mic working? Great. All right. I will be helping them and I will be signing, so you can turn my mic off.
Okay, so this is the first day when we went to Japan and we went through customs, and it was a real struggle because we had to sign so many paperwork with our student name and why we were here, how long we were going to be here. There's a lot of paperwork. It took like an hour there. We had to fill it out twice, one time on the plane and then one time again in the airport of the customs area. So it was really hard and very confusing, but we finally got out and got on the train. So I'm going to talk about Shibuya, and this is the dog. His name is Kaitsu, and this dog is very loyal. His owner had to go to work every day, and he would go and from home, the dog would follow him from home every day, and they went to the train station. Then one day, the owner passed away while he was at work, and the dog waited at the train station and waited and waited. And for 10 years, that dog waited. So this statue is honoring that loyal dog.
And talk about the crossing here in Shibuya as well.
Oh yeah, this is a famous crossing. One time it had over 30,000 people at once. Sorry, can we get the lights turned back on? It makes it very difficult to see the students. Thank you. Oh, I think we have, we leaned against it with our shoulder up here, so just 1 second. Okay, there we go. Oops. All right, so back to the crosswalk. It typically has 3,000 people crossing at a time, but one time the highest number was 30,000 people in a day. And it was in the movie Tokyo Drift, so you might hear in the top left corner. This is their favorite food there, and it's like a pancake that they make with stuff inside.
All right, and what did you like about that? Was it good, tasty?
Really different. It was delicious. Yeah, really good. It's a traditional Japan food. That's why they have okonomiyaki, because they've had it for a long time. Yeah, in Hiroshima, it's called soul food. Yeah.
You guys remember the story about the deaf man who was a guide and had met a couple that were there during the bombing of Hiroshima, and share that experience, that story.
Sure. So our guide told us this story about when the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima. There was a deaf couple, and the husband worked far away on a farm, far from the city, and the wife worked right there in the city. And when the bomb hit, the wife was hurt, badly hurt. And the man came back from the farm and could not find her because you couldn't recognize anyone because their skin had kind of melted off their face. Like, it was really, really bad. So they were in the hospital and walking by like body after body after body. And then he felt someone grab his arm like this, and that's his wife's sign name. So he knew it was his wife because she grabbed his arm like that.
And what did he do?
He carried her home on his back, and he took care of her for was it 13 years? 13 years, yeah. He took care of her. And when she got home, she couldn't sleep laying down. She had to sleep upright because her body was hurt so bad.
Very sad, but a different experience for deaf people, right? They couldn't communicate with everyone in the community around them, and so there's this lack of information. And the deaf man actually felt the bomb out at the farm, and so coming back and looking at ground zero, not being able to find his wife, and he didn't have the ability to ask the people around him where his wife was, to communicate with them, and all he felt was his wife reaching out and grabbing his arm.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk about Miyajima Island here. First thing we saw was this orange torii gate here. And it is on the water. Wait, it's not orange, it's red. Okay, fine, it's what? Sorry. We saw this torii gate. Do you remember why it's orange or red? Do you remember why? Oh, what was it? I'm pretty sure it had something to do with how long it had stayed there, so it didn't become like old or whatever. Right, it was so that no one could find the paint, remember? Because they had to use the things that they actually had. I don't remember that. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the gate. Anyway, the island was surrounded by water, and that's why the Tory's in water, because you could only get through by boat, but you can't live there. You couldn't live on the island. You couldn't really step foot on the island because it was like holy ground, like God's island. And when low tide is there, then you have, the sand is there and you can walk out to the gate. Also, talk about this, remember? Which part? Going in, to the holy area, what you have to do. Okay, so when you arrive, right, there's a lot of stores and all of that, but when you go into the holy land there, you have to walk on the sides of the Tory gate. You cannot walk underneath the middle because that is disrespectful for God, because that's where God would walk, is under the middle of the Tory gate. And when you walked through, you had to bow when you walked through, and then you could continue to walk through. And Michelle's asking, what happens to pregnant women in that area? Oh yeah, they have to be taken off the island, boated off the island, have their baby, and then wait for like 3 months, was it, right? 3 months, and then they could come back on the island. Yeah, and that's still happening now, today, out of respect for their culture in the past. Michelle's asking, so suppose you get really close to death there, what do? You had to go to Hiroshima, you could not die here. You cannot die on this island. That's the rule. So this is the 1,000 red Tory gates, and there were so many, more than 1,000 actually. Yeah, it's very famous. Very cool place, donated by different businesses and people, and depending upon how much they donated was the size of their gate. So if they donated a little bit, they got a little gate, but if they donated a big one, then they got a giant gate. So yeah, or big amount rather. This is funny. Okay, are you gonna talk about this? Yeah. So this is Morrow. So this. Wait, tell me, what am I supposed to, oh, right. Okay, so this was Nara Park, and we went here, we saw so many different deer there, and we learned about the deer. Like traditionally, the people believed that the deer were like sent by God, messengers of God, to relay things back and forth between God and people, and people traditionally would bow to deer and feed them out of respect for the deer. But now you can still feed them, but you don't have to necessarily bow to feed them. If you bow to feed them, then everyone, if you tried to give them one bite, they all would flock to you. And they'd like compete for the food and really try to bite at you and stuff. Don't forget, talk about how the deer, they did kind of bow down. No, I just said that. Did you say that? No, I did say that. Yeah, right. They did do that. Right. The Buddhist monks would bow down to the deer still. That's right. Yeah. So, okay, what happened with Maxine? Do you remember what happened with Maxine? Oh, right here. Yeah. So one of our students, Maxine, bowed down to give food to the deer, but they all came about next to her, and she started throwing food out and ran away. It was so funny. But yeah, because you feed one and they all come and nip at you. So this was a Buddhist temple in Nara. And this was a perfect time we went because it was Buddha's birthday. So there were flowers there, and it was really cool. And this is the biggest Buddha statue in the world. The ear alone is 7 feet long. And the nose is so large enough that people could also, there's one wooden pole that kind of is there, and that's the same size as the nostril. And if you can pass through that wooden tunnel, then you'll have good luck for the rest of your life, right? Yeah, and I went through. I totally went through. I did not. I did not even try. Did you try? Nope. No. Some kids did. Wait, Michelle's saying, who tried and who didn't fit? Adam. One of our chaperones, tried, but he got stuck. He couldn't fit. So do you want to talk about Buddha's birthday? Yeah, I just did. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, Mauro, you want to talk about this? Oh, this is Kiyomizu Dera, and I found this fascinating. This was very interesting to me. So, how many feet is that? Do you remember? 50 or 80? Was it 80 feet? 80 feet. So there's this 80 feet tall cliff there. And in the past, people believed that if they jumped off that cliff and landed at the bottom and survived, then they'd have good luck for the rest of their life. So people would do it all the time. And 80% of the people survived. Nope. Oh, sorry, flipped. Oh, sorry. What do you mean flip? Like 80% of the people lived? No, 80% of the people died, Mauro. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry, my bad. 80% of the people died and 20% of the people survived. So those, but the people that jumped over, eventually the government said, we're not doing that anymore. That's too dangerous. So, they started to stop that from happening. And then there's three like water fountains here, right over in this bottom picture. And they have like different purposes. One was to get a good education. One was to have romance. And the other one was to have good health and long life. But you had to only pick one. You could only pick one. You couldn't pick all three or two of them. If you picked two or three, you weren't going to get anything. So what did you pick? I picked a good, long, healthy life. I picked a good romance. Yeah, relationship. I picked a romance too. What did you pick, Jenna? Me or who? What'd you pick? No, what'd you pick? Jackson, you didn't drink it. Why not? Because I looked at the line and I was like, it was too long. So I didn't want to go in. I didn't really, it wasn't my thing. I picked relationships. What did you pick? I did the wrong one, actually. I didn't go because we shared the same cup, so that was it for me. Michelle saying I was not going to stand in that line. No, they would clean it in between. Okay, define clean. That's not very clean. Yeah, no, they would just kind of rinse it out, and I just didn't want to pick. So, you guys want to talk about Higashiyama? I guess I'm going to go ahead. This is Jackson. So, thank you. So this one is like an old Japanese style town, like a historic place. So you can see that there's different kinds of buildings there in that older style. We did go there and we all wore kimonos like Mauro is wearing today. Here we are. So we wore like the kimonos, we walked around the town, and we went shopping a little bit there too. We had a lot of cool things. Yeah, very cool place. Michelle said, what was the age of that place? Oh, so excuse me, what ice cream did we have? What ice cream flavors did we have? Let's see. They had like matcha tea flavor. And they had vanilla. And what were the other ones that I had? Oh, yeah, black sesame. Yeah. They had like black espresso too. Yeah. That was sesame, actually. It wasn't espresso. No, I had espresso. Well, that was less common, but maybe both. Just 1 second for interpreting thing. Sorry, can't see them I can't interpret if I can't see them. All right, so on this one level, if you walked up there and tripped, you were going to have bad luck for the rest for 3 years. Sorry, for 3 years, and then you had to go down and buy what? Like a gourd. So you have to buy this gourd, and then you'd have good luck. If you don't fall, then you'd have good luck. So, and no one tripped, so we're all good. Okay, you want to talk about this? Yeah, go ahead. Yep. So we went to this team lab borderless that had all these different rooms with really cool inventions there. Lots of colors and glass and ideas and like I can't spell it, but like illusions. Yeah, illusions. It was very cool. It was my favorite thing about here was that they had these glass balls up on the top left corner there. It was so cool. And then they had different like orange colored ones and gray colored ones and blue, and it was really, really cool. Do you want to add anything about the massive size there? Oh, yeah. We went to a deaf-owned restaurant here, and they gave us a lot of different foods to try, and I don't remember what they all were called, but, and this is Jackson. We had, it was like, what was it? It was like kebabs. Like they had fried eggs and cheese rolls. Yeah, cheese rolls. Those were awesome. And then you would like eat them off and dip them in some different kind of sauces. I know Michelle didn't like it at all. Well, Michelle's saying, but I have to warn you, Jackson is our foodie. He will say, oh, I taste this herb inside. I'm thinking I take a hint of this, blah, blah, blah. So, but it was really good. It was amazing. And then are they continuing the business? Yes, but it's not going to be sushi bar anymore. It's going to be a bar, a regular bar. Yeah, so, yeah. Skewers, not sushi anymore. My bad. Interpreter error there. So it's going to be a bar because they want to be able to serve more face-to-face with people, and the restaurant is so much work. Do you want to talk about this one? All right, so this was Japan Deaf Space, and before we left for the airplane, we went here and saw about what deaf people did there. There was, I need you to turn this way, hon. You gotta look at me, thank you. Okay, it was really close to, that's the address there. 5005 is the address. And it was right by the deaf-owned business. Yeah. The ramen place. There was a deaf-owned ramen place. And there was a deaf high school students that were our age there. And they talked about how things were different in the U.S. schools and the Japanese deaf schools. And some of them it was their only school. They walked or biked or traveled by train to get there. They start as young as 7 years old going alone on the train to school. So we obviously don't do that. We go on a bus, but yeah, that's pretty cool. And Michelle says, tell them about the train system. Was it easy and direct, or was it complicated with a lot of different routes? It was like a spider web of routes, really. Yeah. I'll be honest with you, they made it so easy to navigate, though, to find out where you wanted to go. Because there was a map and it showed you exactly the route you needed to go, and you could go on one line and then, switch to the other one, and you could get anywhere in the entire city by following the map. Michelle says there were a few people, are there a few people getting on the train, or was there tons? Tons. There were tons. Yeah, it was so crowded on the train. So was it noisy or quiet? Very quiet inside, yeah. Could you talk and yell at each other, yell to each other? You could, but really, you kind of talked in a whisper. People were really whispering to each other on the train. And there were 5, 6, and 7-year-old kids sitting alone in a seat on the train going to their school. Yep, okay, great. Okay, so we're going to play a quick game with the kids. Okay, this is a fast answer game. Ready, go. So I'm just going to let you watch. What is the normal Starbucks? Starbucks is signed like this here. Oh, Bullet Train's signed like this. Chicago. The name of the guide. Good morning is like this. How do we sign good morning? Good morning like this. Good morning. Yep. Thank you. Arigato. The 5005 was like this with the 2 0 hands together, then blossoming out to the 5s. Different is like this. Different. How do we sign different, guys? Different. Different. I get it. How do we sign it first? Oh, This is how they sign it, like this, right? And what do we sign? We say, I get it like this. Who, they say who like this, who. And what in America, we sign who? Love, there they sign love like this. We sign love. They sign train. Oh, train, underneath the tracks, yeah, because theirs is a subway. What do we sign for train? Train, the train is on the tracks. Like, they did this, like this, like, and we sign like off the chest. They sign black, like black hair, and we sign black just across the forehead. Woman is like this, one pinky finger. How do we sign it? Woman is like this. Man is the thumb, and we sign man off the forehead like this. Mom is mom like this with the pinky finger. And then dad, we sign mom like this. Dad is dad with the thumb to the thumb, sorry, dad. And then we sign dad on the forehead. Ramen, they sign ramen like this. What do we sign for ramen? Ramen, ramen. Color, they sign like this. And we sign color. What does this mean? Here, numbers. This means a number in America. Yeah. Deaf, they sign deaf like this. And ours is in the same place, but with one finger. Rice is like this. And in America, what does that mean, guys? What does that sign mean in America? It means, it's also, what does that mean in America? It means pot, marijuana. That's what it means. Yep. We don't have a sign for rice here. We just spell rice, right? Yeah. We don't eat a lot of our rice like they eat their rice, if you know what I mean. Same is like this there. And here it's same like this, pointing to me and to you. Bamboo, showing the lines on the bamboo. As the lines go up the bamboo, you see the lines, right? The segments of the bamboo. And we just don't have a sign for that. We just spell it. Matcha is matcha, like this. Matcha is green tea, right? So, does it taste good? I like it. It was okay for me. It tastes like grass. Thank you, Jackson. Yes, it tastes like grass. Honesty is always the best policy, Jackson, so nice job. All right, and then this is nada. Buddhism is like this. Buddhism here, what do we sign for Buddha? That's theirs. Shinto. Miyajima is like this. Yeah, it's a complicated sign. Hiroshima. Why is it like that? Because the Torii Gate in Hiroshima is shaped like that. Yeah, it's the Nero Island is really close to Hiroshima, so the name sign is like that. Higashiyama Ward. It was Higashiyama, yeah, Ward, right, yeah. Geisha? Is it geisha? Geisha? Yeah, geisha. Martin. Martin. That was, yeah. Sakura. That's cherry blossoms. So sakura. Sakura. Kimono is kimono like this. And so, yeah. And you have to do the left hand first, because if you do the right hand first, that means death. So we sign with the left hand under first. Okonomiyaki, this is that pancake thing we were talking about. It's a food. It was really good. Momiji manju. What was that one? It's like this, momiji manju, yeah. Why? What is it? It's a bread with, it's like, it's from Miyajima Island, and it's like shaped like a leaf, and it tends to have different things inside that taste really, really good. Like cheese and yeah, pumpkin, all kinds of good stuff, yeah. Kingakuji, this is the Golden Temple, Kingakuji. 24-hour convenience stores. So it's 2 and 4 around the clock. That's how you sign it there. 24-hour convenience store, like a 7-Eleven. Okay, now we're going to play this game. I'm going to shout out, well, we're going to show you actually, and you're going to say the first thing that comes into your head. Okay, ready? Ready? Okay, go. Transportation. No, what do you think of when we say transportation? I think of bullet train. Bullet train? What do you think of? Subway. Yeah. Okay. Think of, what does it make you think of? Toilets. Warm. Warm. Yeah. Water is spurting out at you too. Yeah. Yeah. They're the bidets, you know. Food. I think of okonomiyaki. Yeah. I think of a lot of seafood. I think of the rice balls. Mm-hmm. Eliza said, one word, Jackson, not a sentence. Vending machines make me think of drinks. Explain to them about the vending machines in Japan. They are everywhere, everywhere. Every corner has a vending machine, and they have really good stuff in there. I mean, all of us got like, I don't know, 5 drinks from a vending machine every day. But they do have cold and hot drinks in them in the same machine. And they have like hot chocolate, coffee. They have like energy drinks, strawberry, like water, all kinds of stuff. Really good. Yeah, coffee too. Yep. And some had alcohol in them. Yes, they did. That's true. Yeah. What do you think of this? Oh, biting. Think of the nipping. Yeah. Yep. For sure. The nipping. Yep. And the biggest statue, the Buddha statue, do you think of that? Is that what you said? Yeah. Japanese clothes, what do you think of? I think of soft, silk, kimono. Okay, remember the colors are not very bright, right? What colors did they use? Like dark colors, kind of darker colors. And they showed like, they're very, very modest in their clothing. Like up to here? No, all the way up to your neck. You cannot have a midriff either. It's like everything had sleeves and, yeah, and pants. No rips, no holes in your jeans, nothing like that. What about tattoos? Do they do tattoos there? None. Nope, no tattoos. No tattoos. Earrings? Little earrings, yeah. Yeah. Trash, what do you think of? There's none. No trash. No trash. What about the garbage cans? There were none. They were, yeah, in the 7-Elevens, in the 24-hour convenience stores, or in my backpack. Our backpacks became garbage cans too. Yeah, that was true, right? Yeah. Japanese culture, what do you think of? Quiet. Quiet. I think of Buddhism, respect. Superstitious. Superstitious. Overall experience, awesome. Fantastic, amazing, loved it, chef's kiss, it was so great. Okay, any questions you want to ask the group?
Get that. Board members, any questions that you might have? I will say, as maybe you're thinking about them, I would have expected me to come back with maybe 2 words. And it's like you guys learned an entire new language, which I thought that sign language, ignorantly, I thought that sign language was universal. And so to see that there's different words and that you guys learned this dictionary of them while over there is incredible. So thank you for that.
Mrs. Michelle, tell them your favorite game you played with the high school students over there. We played telephone line, like telephone line. We're going to show you really quick. Okay, come here. So they'll say a different thing, starting with Japanese Sign Language. They would tell her, right, and then pass it to the next student who you'd see, and then like this, and he would turn around and then tell them the next one, and then she'd have to do the American to a Japanese high school student, then Japanese to American high school student, then back and forth all the way down. So fun, so fun.
So my question is, what was the most life-changing part of this experience for you?
I have something. I would say going to Hiroshima and seeing the Peace Museum and the history of the bomb, that was so impactful to me. And I learned about the bombing. But going over there and seeing the perspective of the people who were suffered and what that looked like and that happened in their time was so impactful. Yeah, I completely agree with what Eliza said. It was kind of like the highlight of the trip, honestly. And after that, I was thinking about it a lot. And wow, the way it impacted things. I mean, they had the effect it had on Japanese culture, was so powerful. And for me, I think that going to the high school was so cool. And the dog statue, the memorial of the dog statue was really cool.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, why do I need this?
I would say all. Yeah, they're all different. Yep. I mean, I haven't seen anything that while we were there that was similar at all. Well, hi. I guess hi. Hi was kind of the same. That's kind of universal, but yeah. And Michelle said thank you even is different. It was kind of a chop on the hand where we say thank you off the chin. Did you communicate with the interpreter? We didn't have an interpreter on the trip. We had a deaf guide, and the deaf guide knew ASL, so we just signed the whole time. Yeah. What about with the other kids? How did you communicate through you using ASL and them using Japanese? A lot of gestures. I mean, and we learned, they learned ASL. They had we learned some Japanese Sign Language from our guide and from trips that we had. And plus, we learned more from them. So we just kind of communicated. And Michelle's saying, we did have a translation from the Japanese Sign Language. Remember that guy who told us the story about the couple, right? He said Japanese, JSL, Japanese Sign Language like this. And then the guide was translating it into ASL. So he did do that for us when they were telling us a story. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Superintendent Coleman, back to you.
Thank you. So board members, that took a little longer than most of our presentations that we come in when we have like a canned 5-minute video and so forth, but it's really just once a year you get to see the students, and I hope you just felt a flavor of what every day is like for us. And what Michelle did, it briefly flashed on the screen, but with the advisory council, when this group presented to them, at the end, Adam Billings, who is our program director that went with us over there, he's the guy that's also a ship's captain, if you remember him, and he sails tall mast ships around the world in the summers. And anyway, he's doing his doctoral work right now on project-based learning and real-world learning experiences, and he presented the research on why these type of experiences are so vital to helping kids get them out of the classroom and do things. And then at the end, the most impressive part for me was that he discussed why, for deaf students especially, who their entire lives they've missed so much incidental learning that you and I got through our senses, through hearing, and then similar for blind kids with sight. But he just said this is why this event for them, and in previous years when we've done this using their own trust money, it's just like the crowning event where they go and they realize what they learned in school really is intended to make them more successful, happy, and help them thrive their entire lives. It's not just academics for the sake of academics, so to speak. And so, oh, yeah, Michelle has the, anyway, this is the research. We won't go through it with you right now, but he presented this to us, and it was actually quite impressive. So thanks for indulging us, and these are your students, and so I hope you enjoyed that time with them. Oh, okay, yes, yes. Okay, the next item we have is we have Vicki Summers with us today. She's going to do the monthly budget update. Oh, sorry. Okay, got it. Yeah, I had it on Civic Clerk. Got it. Thank you. So go ahead, Vicki.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Coleman. I'll tell you, our students are a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best. You know, I get to see on paper what our students do, but it's really, you know, I love seeing, tell us in person what they've been able to do with the work that we do here at USDB. With that, I'll say good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chairs, and board members. My name is Vicki Summers. I'm the financial manager for USDB, and I am going to present USDB's budget report for the 9 periods ending March 31st. In the interest of time, I will round the numbers so that we can move through this a little quickly, and the actual numbers are presented in your packet. So if there's any questions at the end. To date, we have revenues of $44.8 million and expenditures of $46.1. Our expenditures, as reported here, have exceeded our revenues, but I am happy to say that in the last hours of pay period, or excuse me, I'm used to payroll, for period ending March 31st, we did have $1.5 million in transfers come in from your office and also from the state trust lands. So that deficit is going to be corrected with our April 2025 reports. So I'm taking to heart advice from Superintendent Jacobson, and I'm going to limit the scope of the report today to just USDB's financial data. On our student reports, we'd like to take an opportunity to review our data collection model, and also, you know, who's going to be the most appropriate to report those numbers to the board, so that we can give you the most meaningful and complete information that we can. So we'll move on then to just the individual funds that we have historically always reported to the board. Our enrichment fund balance for the period ending March 31st is $766,547. Our donated funds are $279,629,000, and our education foundation is at $1.2 million. I am happy to report that USDB is financially solvent. We do have sufficient cash on hand to meet USDB's obligations and payments. The next 2 pages of the report in your packet do detail the information that's presented on page 1. So I would like to know if anyone has any questions for me to this point.
I don't see any lights, so let's go ahead and keep moving.
Okay, great. The very next page, this is our enrichment projects that we have. This is the projects that have, this is the funding that provides the ability for our students to be able to travel to Japan and have these wonderful experiences that we just heard from them about. Of the $1.4 million that was approved by the board, we have expensed $867,000. We do have a balance of $534,000, and that is going to fund our summer camps for our students upcoming. So we're really excited to be able to see what our kids get to do over the summer. I know that the associates of both the deaf school and the blind school like to report on those, so I'm sure we'll hear plenty about those in the upcoming months. And that concludes my short and sweet budget report for March 31st, 2005. Were there any questions for me today? Okay.
I don't see anything. Any questions? Thank you
Great.
for
Well,
your
thank you
presentation.
very much.
Thank you. Do we want to go to item 5.3 now? Okay, so the superintendent report today, I've got a couple things to share, and then Superintendent Patton is with her daughter who's recovering from surgery, so Superintendent Tanner will give you anything she has, or that Superintendent Patton shared with her to share with you. So anyway, a couple things I just wanted to cover. First of all, currently we're still underway with our budget formulation work. The last week, as you're aware, we've been working very closely with Deborah Jacobson. Actually, she's been leading that activity with us. We're very confident that we're going to have great numbers for you to approve in your June meeting for the annual budget. We're using the chart of accounts with program codes now for our budget formulation under her tutelage, and I think we'll be even more effective and precise, and that's important with our smaller margins that we've had in past years. We will have more to follow after the standing committee meets, and you'll hear a report from Vice Chair Wood in a minute. We meet with the standing committee on May 13th, so a week from this coming Tuesday, I think. And then that's a great process. We're so grateful to have that in place. Two other things you should know about: there are two audits that have commenced. The first, on April 24th, we had a kickoff meeting with USBE audit staff, and the auditors are currently reviewing all the aspects of our programs prior to USBE officially taking over our financial operations in the next fiscal year, even though that's really essentially happened already. And then we also have a legislative audit that has been scheduled to begin. We'll have a kickoff meeting for that. There's a conference scheduled the week of May 5th through 9th, so next week. And we've got that on the calendar, so we'll be doing those two audits simultaneously. And that's my report for this month. And so Superintendent Tanner, do you have more education-related things to share?
I think you covered most of it. So this is our student numbers. We were asked to pull those up for you so you can see where we've got it's separated by deaf school and blind school. You can see the numbers for PIP, outreach, and campus, and then we can even break it down. We've broken it down to also direct, serve, and consult. This was for the month of April, the students that were served during that month. So these are pulled from reports within the system. BTOTS outreach is taken directly from the directors, but they are accurate. And then we've got the campus programs, which is taken from Power School. I talked to Superintendent Patton. She's a little consumed right now. She is in her daughter's graduation at this very moment. So she thought maybe that would probably be the most important thing to do, to see her daughter graduate from college. So we're excited about I just shared it. I just got this. We made it last night so that you could have it for today. We were asked to do that yesterday. So that's ready. We're getting ready for graduation, which is May 22nd at 11 o'clock. And we would love to see you there. It's as this on steroids with
So
lots
yeah,
of
so
kids.
just I want to move on from this, but I know it's a really important.
I don't know who that was. I don't know. Anyway, we would love to have you attend and see you there at 11. I apologize for my voice. I obviously have a cold.
She's done.
So, but we're getting ready for summer camp. Summer camps are coming. We're winding down school. By the time we see you, school will have completed. And that's a lot of work.
Thank you for that report. We are not ready to move on from this. I don't know where that video came from, but we have a question by Member Carey.
Thank you, Chair Hymas. And this question is posed to everybody, but my question is, Superintendent Coleman said that there's an audit currently taking place, and is that a USBE audit? And is that USBE staff conducting that audit? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Vice Chair, what do you have a question, or are you just queuing up for the next? Okay. Back to you, Superintendent, if you have anything else, or does that conclude?
That concludes our report now, except for the future things on the agenda that I think Vice Chair Wood will be taking.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 5.4, information again on USDB Standing Committee update. Vice Chair Wood.
I would just highly recommend it for any of you that need a deeper dive into how special education process works within the scope of USDB to watch our USDB Standing Committee from March 11th. USBE Deputy Superintendent Leah Voorhees did an amazing job walking through all the process of how students get to USDB, how they get to outreach. We've been referring members of LF, the legislative fiscal analyst, to them. We just to that. So please go watch it. It's a really great 2-hour kind of a deep dive into education. And then we will be meeting on the 13th, and we'll be doing a deep dive into the budget. So that's kind of what we do. We just get into the weeds. So if you want to know more, watch the videos.
Okay, are we on to agenda item 6? Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Okay, let's move then to agenda item 6.1, information, and we have Dr. Voorhees. Are you gonna speak to that? I've got your name on this. That's why I said that. So if I'm surprising you, then I apologize. Which,
So we're moved to 6. These are all information.
yeah, are we doing, are we,
No.
okay, never mind, Leah, that's on me. So let's move to agenda item 6.3, Board Bylaws, Article 8. So Vice Chair Wood.
All right, 6.3 was an action item. The motion is that we move that the board approve the bylaws draft 1.
Do we have well, it's a standing committee. So that's the motion before the board then, is that the board approve the bylaws draft 1. Vice Chair Wood. Or Hart, my apologies.
Board Member Hart, I have an amendment. I'd like, I'd like to, who's typing? Anybody typing? Oh, back there, okay. That the board strike H2 or H Roman numeral 2 from the bylaws article.
We need to
Can
move
someone
up.
pull that up? There we go. That the board strike H2 from bylaws article 12, draft 1. Article 7, 8. How many I's are there? That's 8. Article 8, draft 1.
So the motion then is that the board strike H-double-I from bylaws Article 8, draft 1.
Yeah, I
And
don't.
that wording that you're looking to strike is right here, right? Discussions
Yes, because
regarding-
I don't think that we can have a.
Well, let's get a second.
Oh.
Do we have a second? We have a second from Vice Chair Wood. Go ahead and speak to that.
Although it's a kind gesture, I don't think we can close for discussions regarding appropriations that may affect specific individuals. That's a budget issue, and budgets have to be done in the sunshine. Sorry.
Okay. Member Lear.
A reason, but we've already decided this committee can keep these, can do this completely behind closed doors if it wants. I thought you said that.
Yeah, Member Hart? Vice Chair Hart, sorry.
Well, it's not to Molly, it's maybe to Leanne. I thought Leanne's, or I thought our discussion was that the committees don't have to be open, period.
Vice Chair Hart, and then we have Member Carey.
Actually, I yield my time to Vice Chair Wood.
Vice Chair Wood.
And
So
Michelle said that.
our bylaws require us to operate under Open and Public Meetings Act.
Our bylaws mean the board's bylaws.
The board bylaws require.
Okay.
And so
But
we
the
are
law does
moving,
not.
we are attempting to amend this bylaw to allow the committee to go into closed session if we were talking about, specific student needs through IEPs or things that would affect personally identified information. We were looking at it as a whole to go into closed session during discussions on appropriations and budgeting, but just having multiple conversations, there's a difference between talking about a budget and talking about the competency and character.
So you support this change?
I do. I wanted us to be able to be all in the dark, but no, we have to be, budgets needs to be transparent.
That would have been helpful background. But
Yeah.
that's- Okay, thanks.
So,
Thank you. AAG Beal.
I just want to provide one point of clarity. So standing committees aren't subject to OPMA, and our bylaws don't make us subject to OPMA. They just say that standing committees shall be open to the public. So not subject to OPMA, just a slight differentiation there. Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. Member Carey.
So the designation of the USDB committee as standing could be changed, because it's only our standing committees that are subject to the provision that AAG Bill just said. We already have a committee that's not standing that meets regularly, which is audit. I don't know why we just couldn't designate the committee as a non-standing committee, and then you could meet and discuss whatever you wanted. But it's just a suggestion.
Would you like to, is there a response here? You guys are looking at each other. I know we just had this debate or conversation when we started this, whether it was a standing or not.
I somewhat agree to that. I think that we really kind of rushed into this knowing that we needed to take these deep conversations, and hindsight is 20/20, right? I don't know that a standing committee was the appropriate movement that we did. But because we did, we're trying to work under the confines of the bylaws as they are.
Yeah, Member Carey.
Just think that just given the nature of that committee as really an oversight committee of the institution, again, I don't think we've ever defined what a standing committee is in our bylaws or policy. But, Michelle Buse, she's saying yes, but to the extent that it's permissible, I think that would be the best solution and give you the most flexibility. But that's a decision for leadership. Thank you.
Well, I guess I would ask the board, because I said it before, I'm not worried about failure. If we try something and we notice something doesn't work, then let's adjust it. And so if we need to take a minute, and we can vote on this, absolutely. But it sounds like the invitation is almost to bring something back to the board to say, are we happy with a standing committee, or would we like to readdress that? Vice Chair Hart.
So as, you know, I chair audit, and we have really tried to look at everything we do and put as much as possible in the sunshine. And I think we should approach all of our work from that perspective. Like everything should be in the sunshine unless there's a reason for it, rather than putting things in the darkness and then pulling them out, so to speak. The other concern I have is that USDB, so we are wrestling and we are trying to figure out what works and what doesn't for USDB. If that would be like putting an entire LEA, because that's what USDB is, in a not sunshined committee. That would be like saying that an LEA, Canyons, could have a closed meeting and do what they need to do before they had their open meeting, and it doesn't feel as right as sunshining as much as you can and then taking out the pieces that really do fit under those provisions. So I just am more comfortable doing what we're moving in this direction, where as much is open and we, you know, fail or we have a good reason to put it in closed, rather than put everything in closed and then work from there. I don't know. That's just my perspective as a board member.
Yeah, we've got Vice Chair Wood and then Member Bollinger, and I don't want to get into the habit of doing this. There's some conversation right now of saying, okay, do we just strike this, to Member or Vice Chair Hart's point, or do we need to re-look at the structure? Is that something that we want to do now? We would need to talk to AAGs. Is it worth a few minutes to have a conversation with our AAGs? What do you think? Do you want to take 5 minutes and have a brief recess? 5 minutes. Let's start a timer. Thank you. Board members, thank you for that brief recess there. Just another brief discussion behind me. Vice Chair Hart.
My motion stands, and I'd like to commence discussion, and I'm not withdrawing my motion.
Okay, so the motion before the board then is that the board strike HII from Bylaws, Article 8, Draft 1. Seeing no discussion. Yep, go ahead, Member Carey.
Could we call that up on the screen? That provision of the bylaws?
What that would look like in the bylaws?
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you.
Let's just take a few seconds and get that on the screen. Member Carey.
Is my understanding we need to strike that to bring our bylaws in compliance with the law? Is that correct? Because we cannot discuss appropriations in a closed meeting. Is that why we're doing this? I'm just trying to track it.
That's
Bad practice.
We're saying bad practice? Okay.
Can I comment?
Please, Vice Chair Wood.
There is nothing, so we do not have to use law, Section 52-4, 205, because standing committees are not, as AG Bill explained, we're not under it, but we try to live by it. And so looking at that, there was this comparison between, are we talking about a budget or are we talking about specific individuals? And that made the difference.
So you're saying that in an open meeting, it would need to be open, and I'll give a rough example. If you say, okay, we don't have the bandwidth to have a board chair, and then I'm just listening to this at home, and I'm like, oh, I guess my job is gone. Is that what I'm hearing? That was the concern. That's okay. Okay.
That was the original purpose in including this.
And now we're asking for it to be removed. Okay. Okay. Let's jump back. I don't see any lights. Let's restate the motion. I believe we're ready to vote. The motion is that the board strike HII from Bylaws Article 8, Draft 1. Let's go ahead and vote. Member Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Brinton?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes 13 in favor, 2 absent. So, thank you. That moves us to agenda item 6.4. Oh, we need to go to the bylaw. Thank you. So the motion before the board then is that the board approve the bylaws draft 1 as amended. Seeing no lights, let's go ahead and vote.
Board
Member Brinton. Board Member Brinton's a yes.
Thank you. And Member Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously with members Davis and Bogus absent. Thank you. Okay, on to agenda item 6.4, establishing working group. We're going to turn time again to Vice Chair Wood.
All right. I move that the board approve the makeup of the membership for the 19-person USDB working group with a facilitator assigned from USBE. This would include 3 USBE board members, 2 superintendents, one from a small LEA, one from a large LEA, a RISA representative, business administrator, 2 USBE staff, 4 USDB staff, 1 House member, 1 Senate member, 1 member representing charter schools, 2 LEA special education directors, 1 from a small LEA, 1 from a large LEA, 1 member, a community member from the USDB Advisory Council member, and other invitees based on content needs.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wood. Can you give context behind the purpose for this working group and what their goal would be?
Yeah, so this is designated from Public Ed Appropriations. They made a recommendation that this happen, that we constitute a working group to discuss concerns about USDB governance oversight, the role and scope of outreach services and services within USDB, and facility needs. And then we will come forward with we'll do a report to PEA and EAC in the fall as to our, mostly it was designated specifically for facility needs initially, but then PEA kind of grew it in scope.
Thank you. So the motion before the board then is that the board approve the makeup of the membership for the 19-person USDB work group facilitator assigned from the USBE. You can see the list there. I'll state it again before we take a vote, but let's go over to Member Carey.
Yeah, I think the group is fine. I just don't see any, and it's possible I missed it, but parents of students, I don't see that. I see the base, I see the bottom one as a catch-all, but is there any reason why parents of students were excluded from the working group?
Is that directed to you, Vice Chair Wood?
I'm trying to remember. I believe we talked about parents, but then we in talking about what the end game of this work group was, it really is, can we create a comprehensive look at how USDB is funded, which is primarily a USDB legislative goal, the facility needs, which is really a USDB, USBE function. And so it was really kind of that higher level discussion that we weren't sure where the parent input would support that work.
And if I may,
Follow
Chair.
up, yep.
Yeah, and so when I looked at the purpose of the group, I agree. If it were just facilities, probably not. USDB governance, probably not. But you also include role and scope of services. And so when I look at that, I think that would be very appropriate for parents of students to have a voice in. So again, maybe they don't want to sit through the facility conversation. I don't know. But I just know that I think it's important. So I would just I'd make the motion. And if role and scope of services are going to be discussed, I think it's appropriate for this body that you're putting together, the working group, to have a parental involvement. So I would just make a motion that two parents of students be included in the working group.
So let's make sure we get this motion typed up correctly before we seek a second and then speak to it. Okay. Hold on, let's get this. Are we good? Is it that simple? That's okay. Yeah? Okay, do we have a second? We have a second by Member Hall. Did you want to speak to that, Member Carey? No, I think I did. Okay. I know Superintendent Coleman had some thoughts, then we're going to go to Member Booth and Member Earl.
Just by way of context, this is a similar discussion we had when the board changed the formerly called institutional council to the advisory council, and they actually removed parents from that advisory council. This is right before I was appointed as superintendent. We've since gone back, and we now have a couple parents on the advisory council too. And so you can imagine it's a delicate conversation, but what the board found with the advisory council was that the parents often come in with a very narrow scope of what their filter of what their child needs, and they have a very difficult time understanding what all of the students in USDB need because it's such a broad scope of things. And so that was kind of the discussion that the working group had. Also, they acknowledged that the advisory council has parents on it currently, and there's a representative from the advisory council, as well as the last item on that list allows the advisory group to, or the working group, to invite parents or anyone else in for that matter if the subject matter seems to pertain to them more than this kind of level of what the legislature requested from the group. So that's the context that the discussion occurred, that occurred in the discussion with the standing group. And I don't want to ever speak against parents being involved, so I just wanted you to know the full context of that.
Thank you. Member Booth?
I am just referring back to one of our standing committee meetings a couple of weeks ago, where our esteemed colleague from USBE, who's taking the lead on the deep dive on finances, indicated that it might be important for someone to represent LFA on this working group, just so they were able to hear all of the perspectives from all of these various people that are going to be coming up with the best recommendations, rather than waiting after the fact and delivering the information to them secondhand. So as we're looking at the makeup of this group and adding parents or whatever, I don't know whether we want to do that separately, but I would like us to at least consider the strong recommendation from our staff member as to whether that ought to be a part of this working group.
Thank you. Member Earl?
Yeah, and I'm glad Superintendent Coleman had reminded me about the conversation, because I remember we did bring it up, and then you know what I mean, I was trying to think in my mind, where did we go with that, and why did that not end up here? And I think that maybe we ought to consider 2 members from the USDB Advisory Council, that maybe the council itself, decides who those individuals are, and keeping in mind that we probably need some parent representation there. And then the invitees, I think we can, I think once again, we start getting larger and larger and larger. The LFA, we did discuss that as well, and I do think that falls under the invitee based on content needs. I don't know that they would need to be there for every meeting, but I do think that there's some meetings that this entity would want to have someone from LFA there. So, and if we do 2 parents, I don't know if there's a way. What would that look like? I guess what I'm trying to think in my mind is how would you make that decision? Would you just have parents submit? Does that make sense? A recommendation that they would want to participate on this? Is that the best way to do that if this passes? I'm just wondering what that would look like, or would it be? I don't know. I'm just curious what you may have in mind. Chair?
Please.
Associate Superintendent Tanner, I would recommend that we pick people that are infected in the outreach, right? That scope and services. But if you were to talk about parents, you'd probably want a parent that represented outreach, that represented the campus programs, because I think both are going to be discussed. Probably one from the blind, the deaf, and then it does expand the group. My other thought was, as the group progresses, I think it would be wise to maybe send a questionnaire, or even the group could do a focus group with the parents that specifically invites a group of parents as a part of that and interviews a focus group of several parents with very different perspectives and brings it back to the standing committee so that we get more than just 4 parents, that we could get a large group that's interested. Just a thought or a survey to somehow get, once we had something that we could look at substantially, that they could provide some meaningful input on it. Just a way to really, I think they're very important, and I think it'd be nice to get more, and that's hard when it's 20.
So are you saying, let me just make sure I'm understanding, you're saying that maybe the advisory group itself, or this group that's being put together, the suggestion is to make sure that they facilitate some very direct communication with all parents or larger parent group in order to carry on that discussion?
Yeah, possibly a focus group and maybe surveys or something that really get a meaningful impact from a wide range of parents.
Okay.
Thank you. Member Kelly?
Yeah, I did have my hand raised and then I lowered it, but I will speak to the motion. I do like the motion. It would be a panel of 20 people. I don't think that 2 parents would overwhelm any vote that may be taken, and I think that parents do play an integral role in bringing a different perspective. I know a lot of times, educators have a professional perspective, but parents have that in the trenches understanding of what kids are going through in the moment. And so I speak to this motion.
Thank you. Member Brenton?
Thank you, Chair. I am just not sure on this motion. I am inclined to listen to what Superintendent Coleman said about parent scope here being pretty narrow, and I am wondering if the advisory person couldn't just serve a role on polling parents before meetings on things that we would like to gather parent input in. It seems like I remember that it's just been hard to get together this big of a group anyway, and so anyway, I would just share a concern with that. As the bigger that it gets, the harder it is to get people into the meeting. But can we facilitate that parent input with surveys and questionnaires so we do get a broader scope of their insights? Thought.
Thank you. Member Earl?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that 1 parent is from outreach and 1 from on campus. Did I use the right terms for those 2 parents?
So there's an amendment to the amendment, or amendment to the motion. Amendment to the amendment. That let's make sure then. Well, let me ask: is there any opposition to what Member Earl is suggesting here? Seeing none, let's incorporate it into the motion and make sure that both parties are in the right connection there. So the updated motion before the board then is that 2 parents of students be included in the membership of the USDB working group. 1 parent has a student in outreach, and 1 parent has a student on campus. I don't see any other lights. I'm just going to make a quick comment here. I do want to. I recognize there's a few things happening here. There's quite a large group here. We're adding 2 more, which doesn't really seem like a big deal, but it does get big. I do want to recognize also that there are people on this panel who respond regularly to parents, and those being 3 USBE board members, 1 House member, and 1 Senate member. As well as, you could argue that others are gathering parent feedback as well. So I don't feel like this is absent of parent representation. And so I'm speaking against the motion, but I see both sides, I guess. I'm not going to belabor that. But anyway, the motion then is, let's state it one more time. And this is an amendment. Sorry, Kelsey. Thank you. The motion then is that the board add 2 parents of students to be included in the membership of the USDB working group, 1 parent with a student in outreach and 1 parent with a student on campus. Let's go ahead and vote. Member Brinton?
I am a yes.
Thank you, Member Kelly. Member Brinton?
Member Brinton's a no.
Member Bogus?
Yes.
Okay, we've got 12. How many should we expect? It might. Depends on what, I know. We've got a 7 and a board member out in the hall. Is that it? That motion fails. 7 in favor, 6 in opposition. Those in opposition being Member Bollinger, Vice Chair Hart, Member Brinton, Member Lear, Vice Chair Wood, and Member Hymas. This brings us to the underlying motion, which is that the board approve the makeup of the membership for the 19-person USDB working group, facilitator assigned from USBE, 3 USBE board members, 2 superintendents, 1 small and 1 large, RESA representative, business administrator, 2 USBE staff, 4 USDB staff, 1 House member from Public Ed interim or PEA, 1 Senate member from Public Ed interim or PEA, 1 member representing charter schools, 2 LEA special education directors, 1 small and 1 large, USDB Advisory Council member, invitees based on content needs. This is not part of the motion, but I will encourage this working group when there is space for that. I don't want to say space. There's always space for parent representation. I agree with Member Carey on his motion there, but if there is vocabulary is not my jam, but if there's space or appetite, get those parents in there, get the feedback. I encourage the USBE members to do so, the House and State and Senate member to do so, but I do recognize the difficulties. So that's the motion. Let's go ahead and vote.
I am a yes.
Member Bogus is a yes.
Brinton's a yes.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Member Bogus is a no.
Bogus is a no, Kelly is a yes, Brinton is a yes. Okay. And that passes 9 in favor, 1 abstention, 3 no votes, abstaining being Member Booth, no from Vice Chair Hart, Member Bogus, and Member Green. This takes us to agenda item 6.5, a discussion. Back to you, Vice Chair Wood.
No, that was from our agenda, so our business is complete.
Thank you. With that, we will move into our study session, and we have Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones who is going to lead that. Yes, thank you to the USDB for your work and help here. Thank you.
Just move your mouth and I'll be like, you know, so you guys. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, thank you for the opportunity, Chair Hymas, Vice Chairs, and the board to provide a study session on the budget formulation process leading into the requirements under the Budgetary Procedures Act to submit a budget proposal to the governor around October, or basically after your October meeting, and then subsequently as we move together towards what our requests will be for the 2026 legislative session. I do want to start at your direction, Chair Hymas, with the overall budget process, and then we'll do the deeper dive into the budget formulation process. So you may need to, I just need to advise board members that you may need to refresh your agenda, or the civic clerk agenda, so that you can see just the two presentations. The rest of the backups were available there, but we had the presentations added so that you could follow along with my study session presentation here. So,
Scott?
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna pull the old 7 habit, begin with the end in mind here.
Yes.
Can you
Sure.
tee us up with that?
Yeah, so the end in mind is that you as the board, first and foremost, we want to make sure that it is the board that is leading in all things budget related, meaning the overall budget process, which we'll get into here as a overarching for familiarity as part of the study session. And then the end state is that you as the board agree to the process of what amounts to your formulation or identification of funding requirements for K through 12, again, leading into the required by law submission to the governor's office in the October timeframe, and then ultimately as we move together and work together with the legislature so that again, the emphasis being that this is your process, this is at your direction, this is at your lead, and staff are here to provide the documents and or support that you need that are necessary for you to formulate or, for lack of a better term, develop what funding request you intend to make as part of the proposal to the governor in October, and then ultimately to the legislature in the 2026 legislative session. Does that help with the end state in mind? Okay. So if we can get started on the overall budget process, this is just this is just an overarching high-end overview of the entire budget process, of which a portion of it is where we'll get deeper into today, is the budget formulation or identification of requests for funding to meet the requirements of the Budgetary Procedures Act with the governor, and then the 2026 legislative session. So next slide, please. So here's the, a snapshot or overall categorization of the overall budget process for your review. Next slide, please. And I'll go through this quickly. Here's the overall budget timeline from beginning to end. It starts in May of 2025. If you'll go back up to May, are we in May there? Yes. Okay, so you can see that we've, and I'll elaborate more on this about the actions or steps that were taken today in Finance Committee. It's kind of a chicken egg timing aspect that the study session was today in the afternoon, but we had Finance Committee in, earlier this morning as part of the Finance Committee schedule. It wasn't to be presumptive or anything, and I'll demonstrate that. You'll see my point there. Again, this timeline is based on precedents of what your colleagues, previous board members, and existing board members now had determined was the best timeline, the best processes related to the overall budget. And then, like I said, we'll get into the development aspect or the formulation piece. So here's what typically happens in May. Then we move towards June. Next slide. July, October, then November. Next slide. And then the question. So this is the overall just big picture process. Okay, so if we could go to the next item in the back, or the next presentation. Here is the key takeaway today about what process we followed in the past and what we're looking to the board to ratify or support going forward too, which is the timeline related to again, what we call the formulation process, meeting the standards of the Budgetary Procedures Act for the submission. Call your attention to the month of October, where that submission is assured or insured to meet the law. But then subsequently from October, on, we go into the aspects of working closely with the legislature to get legislative approvals and support for your funding requests. I will pause here, Chair Hymas, to see if there's any questions or concerns, because again, this is the deeper dive on the one aspect of the overall budget process related to the key piece of the formulation, or how we go about, at the board's direction, staff go about creating and preparing your requests for funding in the next legislative session. So I'll just pause here, let the board members review this, and see if there's any questions or concerns.
Thank you. Let's just take a minute to review the screen, and we'll see if we have any questions. We don't have any currently, but we'll take about 20 to 30 seconds. And I will say, and you'll see it when you review or watch finance, there were a couple made already today. So here we are.
And I plan on talking about that too, sir. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
that's
Yep,
perfect.
okay.
That's what I'm just saying. It's not too early to start the conversation.
Right.
Sometimes I've seen over the past 4 years, it gets brought up late, and we can start now. That's what I'm saying.
Because you can see on the chart, if I may, there's this April, May, that begins there. So we did begin in Finance Committee really in May with what you see as the bulleted items that are above the April month. But it's not, there was 1 year where we did start in April, but starting in May is fine. The discussions were taking place back in April too. So that's why we put it kind of April, May on the start of the process that has been agreed to in the past by the board. Again, this is a precedence process, but it's really subject to revision or change, because I can't emphasize enough that we want to facilitate that this is a board-driven process that ultimately results in what you, the board, feel is necessary for funding for K through 12 education.
Thank you. We've got Member Bollinger and then Member Earl.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't know if this may be a question to you or to Deputy Superintendent. As a new member, my question, I guess, would be the proposed topics that looks like come from the Finance Committee. Those of us that are not on the Finance Committee, do we send recommendations of ideas early on? It sounds like we don't want to be too late in the process. So what would be the appropriate participation of those of us that are not on the Finance Committee?
Yeah,
Scott,
sure.
I'm going to assume this is a study session. It's a little more casual as we go back and forth. So I'd hope that you'd feel comfortable answering those questions. Thank you.
So the answer to your question is well, really both. Yes, we encourage board members who are not members of the Finance Committee to develop this with your colleagues, right? To provide input to them on what you see. However, we've built into the process a system where should you adopt the process again, the formulation process next month as part of the board meeting and part of a motion that was made today by the Finance Committee, as you can see on the timeline here that in the month of June, it starts to become more moving towards the board, but the Finance Committee still can make recommendations or suggestions to the board in June as well. But then when we get past or into, you don't meet in July. So when we get into the August timeframe, we're really just trying to emphasize that by then it becomes more the board, right? Less Finance Committee, more board. So yes, we would encourage you to have input to the Finance Committee to see if but there's also the opportunity in June for you as a board member not on the Finance Committee to make recommendations starting as early as June. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Okay.
Thank you. Member Earl.
And it's clearly on here, but just for new board members, the idea that the reason why we start so early is we actually have to turn a budget in to the governor's office in October, which
Yes, ma'am.
you've probably already hit. But that's the idea is then you start backtracking from that. And as board members, so I guess really, if you're a new board member, an old board member, however you want to term that, if you had something you wanted to develop out, you might want to bring it in June to develop it out. But you could add it at any time, including in October or January of next year. But if you want it to be developed out in full consideration, it just, it would lend itself to a little bit more discussion and dialogue prior to that.
Yeah.
But
from a staff perspective, I do appreciate Board Member Earl bringing that up, because since you don't meet in July, as much as we can get from you as staff to build or to develop for those future board meetings, August, September, October, would be great, because the June, July timeframe leading into the board meeting in August gives us an opportunity to work on those. So if June is really an important month for both Finance Committee and the board, for you all to provide us with what do you want us to work on, right? What do you want us to formulate as far as a potential request that would be at your direction or your approval? So I appreciate that, calling that out. As much time as we as staff can spend on it will lead to accuracy and reliability in our calculations and those aspects. And we really like that month of July to help work on those. So now that doesn't mean that as your constituents are providing you feedback, your districts, your charter schools on what their priorities would be for funding, that we still won't have time. We still will have time to develop that, with the end state being that really by October we've completed all the requests for funding templates or documents for your decision-making purposes. So thank you for that.
Thanks,
So,
Scott. I've got
yeah.
both vice chairs and then member Carey. So there's your lineup. Get ready.
I'm
Vice Chair
ready.
Wood.
I'm just wondering if in this slideshow or moving forward, you talked about precedents, but precedents to this point has been approximately 10 to 13 items.
Yes.
$100 million of wish list that really,
Right.
in the end, we had to come back and backtrack and review. How can we start the process better so that when we get to an end goal, we've used evidence, we've determined that this is a true need, we can all rally around it because we support it? Is there a way that we can change precedents, change process
Yes.
to do better?
Yes, absolutely. And I would just ask that you hold that question, because I do have some additional presentation materials that might help address that on how the process could be changed to be more adaptable towards current conditions related to revenue, related to economics, or the state of the economy, those aspects. So could I answer that question hopefully in with some additional presentation here?
So, is it out of the realm of possibility to get out of the Budgetary Procedures Act?
Yes, it would take a policy change or a request for, which is in, Deputy Newey's lane. So this is strictly just about budget formulation under the current law.
Right.
But as you know, we have really a two-pronged approach with the legislature. We request money, and then we also request changes to statute.
Right.
So that process would be where we could do that, and I would strongly recommend that we do just that. So,
she's not here, but, oh yeah, wait, are you here? Yeah, you are here. Hi, Deputy Newey. If you could add, well, I think I don't know, I don't want to say just as one board member, but I'd like more information about the pros and cons of that request. Because here's what happens. We start now. It's really great that we start early, and we should start early. Nothing about that should change. However, we end up taking, a lot of things happen between now and then, and we end up sometimes looking a little foolish because we haven't adjusted. We didn't have, because of the constraints, we are asking for things as time changes, and then we're asking for things that that are kind of foolish. I don't know, but I'm just hoping, I know this is a bird walk, which is why I want to keep it on the budget, but I would like some more information about the pros and cons of asking for a policy change on the Budgetary Procedures Act in our obligations under it so that we can look and see if that's best for us. Do I need a motion to do that, Chair?
I'm wondering how that feedback would look. I mean, you might need a motion. I'm okay with that. I'm just.
Right. So as we progress in this process, which is interrelated with the statutory change request process, if you'll recall, there's an agenda item. It's a perpetual agenda item where we do both,
Okay.
right? We do that. That's where you would make the action item.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, the request or motion to develop the statutory change.
Okay.
This because we had an hour, we really just centrally focused on the budgetary process, but that process is very well supported by that perpetual agenda item that you see on the board agenda that has, requests for funding and requests for statutory changes.
Thank you for that reminder. That's just going to be a preview of coming attractions.
Sure.
Just let's move on.
Sure. Okay, so good on this slide. Any more questions? I think I see a light.
We've
sir.
got member Carey,
Okay,
and then I
okay.
think we're ready to move on.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to say that the timeline is very helpful, and I think we had this last year as well. But I just wanted to say thank you to the Deputy Superintendent and to leadership. There is flexibility built into that as well. And I remember that on the School Safety Task Force, we were trying to figure out what the ask was going to be, the legislative ask from that task force in terms of school safety funding. And we couldn't do it until we got the assessments in from the schools. Those assessments didn't come in till December. And it left us as a body behind the eight ball a little bit, because I know we wanted this in sooner, but just to say thank you to the Deputy Superintendent and to leadership. We got those numbers in, and we made it a board funding priority. So even though this template should be followed, there is flexibility in the system where needed. So thank you.
Yes. Okay, so if we could pull up the backup document titled FY or funding comparisons, if you could, yes, that's one. Okay, so today in Finance Committee, as part of the support to what is currently the process, as our understanding is from staff, we provided this to the Finance Committee members. And I thought it would be a good value add to the study session, because as relates to Board Member Bollinger's earlier point or question, you as board members that are outside the Finance Committee, and then starting in June, can start thinking of what you would recommend the board prioritize. Well, we won't not prioritize, but consider as a funding proposal to the governor, then subsequently to the legislature. What this is it provides an aggregate level or overview of what we've experienced as far as funding for the past 5 years. Go ahead. Oh, is it cut off? Oh, public education. So that's the total. Oh, I should know that. Public education. Can I phone a friend?
All three of us have phoned a friend up here. You are the friend.
Let's see. Is Sam online? So, yes. Yeah, it's public education, economic stabilization restricted account.
Now, I don't have
Public
confidence in that.
education,
That's-
economic
Okay.
stability. So that's the amount of money that came from that source. So, yes. See, superintendent tracks and knows the budget better than I do. So, which is great. So, yes, public education, economic stabilization restricted account. Okay. All right. So with that, here is the 5-year results. Now, this particular chart should be segmented in two parts. On the left side is where we landed with particulars related to the value of the WPU stemming from fiscal year 22. Recall, please, that back in 20 was the Amendment G, where as part of Amendment G, the legislature is required to provide at a minimum the what's titled the inflationary increase to the value of the WPU. So stemming from that, but we only went back 5 years to 22, you see that in 22 there was the 2% inflationary increase, and then there was a add of a 3.9% discretionary increase, resulting in a 5.9% total WPU value increase in 22, as an example. Then you can follow 23, 24, 25, and 26. Now, 26 is the first year that we've seen since Amendment G was enacted and the requirement for the inflationary increase, where there was an additional percentage. If you recall, you as the board had originally asked for a higher percentage of discretionary percentage increase to the WPU, but then, and I'll get into this just in a few minutes, you revised it, and I'll explain why all that happened. So then you can see that we only received the legally mandated amount, which was based on a 5-year rolling average of the CPI, of the Consumer Price Index, which was 4%, or which is 4%. You as the board had revised your request to a 1% above that, but we received the 4%. Now, moving towards the right-hand side of the chart, the ongoing funding increases and the one-time increases. So to show you the trend, and I would say that these are largely determined by where the state is for revenue estimates, right? What are we looking at receiving in the future? Not entirely, but I do really believe that that's a strong consideration. So you can see the trend there of the ongoing funding, which consists of the, here we go with the acronyms and stuff, total income tax plus uniform school funds plus the TSSA. And that's the, teacher and student success account, how much ongoing money we received in the past 5 fiscal years, including the most recent, or what we're going into with FY26, and then the one-time funding increases. And so you see that this last year was one of the lowest years, or one of the years where we received the lowest amount of ongoing funding. And that's really commensurate to what was indicated by, because it's typically not until the December timeframe, and even the Executive Appropriations Committee of the legislature gets really a very good idea of where things are at for revenue estimates, right? What was doing, and I think that's part of your consideration related to the Budgetary Procedures Act, those types of things, is it's really hard to make proposals if you just honestly don't know how much you're trying to make, budget against. Understood. So, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on that, or a little bit further on that. And part of Amendment G2 was the establishment of the Economic Stabilization Account. And so you see that in the last column. So, so trends, right? Just really high aggregate level things. So now if we could drop down to the red chart, or orange, or whatever color you're seeing there too. I see red a lot. So the WPU value increase, thank you for listening to that. Yeah, okay. So the WPU value increase, each year the legislature and the GOPB will establish what the estimate is for a 1% increase on the value of the WPU. So that $45 million you see there, it was just what was agreed to would be the increase should they have added on 1%, it would have been about 45 million. So the 4% increase is 4 times, or is 4, the 4% is 4 times roughly. It came in, this is rounded up, so it's not 45 million precisely. I think it was 44 million and something. I don't have that number in front of me, but that's what resulted in how much money was part of the money that was provided as related to the the inflationary increase of 4%. So why we're showing you this is because if you recall, as part of your process last year leading into the session, and I know we have new board members on here, is that you had established a priority list, and I'm hoping, and I'm addressing Vice Chair Wood's question here, is you had identified a priority list at one point in the process. You can certainly change that, or look to do it, because when we got to the month of December, so after submitting to the governor, then we got to the month of December, it became abundantly clear, it was made abundantly clear because leadership was met with the respective chairs of PEA and Public Education Appropriations, here we go with the acronyms, and the Executive Appropriations Committee had met with them, and they really did make it clear, hey, look, this is not a good year for a lot of requests, or revenue dictates, or what our estimates of revenue dictates. And you as a board went back and revised your requests for funding and made these your priorities for funding based on the information that your leadership got and they shared with you back then to do it. So we understand how difficult it is to try to make proposals for requests for funding when you're really not sure about where things are at with revenue. It's that Budgetary Procedures Act that requires us to really start this process to get to that point. And while I can provide you initial estimates, it's really, again, emphasizing that it likely isn't and hasn't been until December, where we really get a good picture of how much money is going to be made available to public education. So you can see that our 1% request above the inflationary increase was not appropriated. We also identified critical FTE needs. That was not appropriated. Then there was the student information systems, and that started at 38 million, went to 35 to 20, but the legislature did fund 10 million. As part of HB 508, we've got to develop that a little bit further so that we can make recommendations to Public Education Appropriations Committee in October on the use of those funds. And then you had prioritized USDB for 4 million of ongoing money too, and that didn't get appropriated as well. So this is, again, an aggregate or large snapshot about what we've experienced as far as funding goes and has been awarded to us. And then just using last year as an example, where we ended up with your requests and your priority for requests related to the process too. So I do want to pause here and see if I addressed Vice Chair Wood's questions. But the short answer is yes. You as the board have all the authority in the world to adapt the process to whatever fits your needs and ultimately drives the direction of staff on formulating next year's proposals.
Thank you. Well, Vice Chair Wood will answer if that addresses her question or not. And then we have Member Earl.
This is really helpful in looking at the actuals. I still would love to understand how we make better data-driven decisions in terms of what student needs are. I think if there's a way to determine what our students require, that we need to prioritize funding for. And maybe that's with the lack of a new strategic plan, all of that, maybe that's where we're stuck with that. But I do have one question, and as you see that ongoing decrease in the ongoing funding, can any of that be tied back to percentage-wise with the tax cuts?
It can,
And
yes.
if we know that there was another tax cut, could we assume even less this coming year? Or am I
think that's a fair assumption to make. I mean, I would say potentially. I mean, we have seen less emphasis on, or not emphasis, but less ongoing money, and then also aware of subsequent or parallel reductions in the income tax rate. I mean, as it stands right now, the income tax fund pays for K through 12, higher ed, and then disabled population, right? That hasn't changed. Well, since that was agreed to back with Amendment G. So, moving forward, I would anticipate that any reduction in the income tax subsequently would result in the potential for a reduction in ongoing funds. Yes.
Thank you, Member Earl.
Okay, just a couple things. So the far blue column, that's restricted funds. Those
Yep.
are, there's so much money that's put into those each year, right?
There is so much that is put in each
And
year,
then we
yes.
draw from that.
We draw
But it was
from that.
meant to be more of a rainy day fund, if I remember originally when it was set up, but it's kind of rainy day, we need the money fund.
Yes. However, I do still believe it still could be considered that, but because of the revenue that has been put in there and the availability of the funds, I think subsequently it led to funding
And
particulars out of that.
accessibility.
And
right?
accessibility, yes,
Accessibility,
yes,
okay.
yes.
All right, that may be my only question. You're kind of, in looking at this, we got Christmas list, right?
Yeah.
In column, middle
Right.
column red. And then we have
Well,
mom and dad said no, right? In the far column,
Well-
or they had their own things they wanted to buy for Christmas, right?
Right.
So
Remember,
that's kind of,
Our Christmas list was about
Yes.
500 million?
yeah, I was going to
right.
say.
That's
Right,
right.
yes.
Yeah, that was, we circled everything in Toys R Us catalog.
Right.
This,
And then it became, of which 10 became your priority. But then as we got,
Yeah.
when we all came to terms with where revenue was at, based on the Executive Appropriations Committee in December, then,
So
this was a revised.
Yeah, I guess I just-
revised list.
So I'm just kind of thinking out loud because Board Member Wood, or Vice Chair Wood, had just articulated that how do we make a more reasonable ask? But I guess in some ways, the initial ask might not be reasonable. It might be, it should be reasonable, right? I guess we're assuming that. But I guess still asking the question could lead to at least some quantifiable amount
Sure.
for a particular, if that's a direction a board member or their constituency wants to go on something, right? I'm
Right.
looking at like the lunch thing last year, right? That was moved through the board, but whether or not people, in the end, it kind of got whittled down a little bit, but it still paid for most of that. And yet it wasn't necessarily,
Yes.
because
yeah.
it had, and, okay, anyways,
Yeah, no,
never mind.
you're
Now I'm just
spot
talking.
on. I think this is an important point too, to bring in the other piece of. So you're taking and doing your process. We get closer to the legislative session. Well, legislators are going to have their. So that's what I would call a parallel process to your process. Is you as the elected officials for K through 12 education are formulating your recommends to the legislature. But as we know, individual legislators also have theirs, and they have a process that they take with public education appropriations. So then is that competition? Not necessarily. It goes to Board Member Earl's point about, the push through of. I think a good example is the
Lunch.
Yeah, the food.
The food.
Piece that also is important, that you might feel is supportive or important to the students as well. So there's that process that takes place as well.
And I guess strategically, if you wanted an initiative or something to go through, you might want to work with a legislator
Yes.
and engage with the board, right? Because then it's two mechanisms running some through. I don't know. I guess I'm just throwing that out there,
Right.
strategy. So, okay.
Yeah, yeah. We really try to value and emphasize a cooperative and mutually beneficial process with our colleagues in the legislature, right? With your elected officials in the legislature, and it's worked out really well. There was so much appreciation for the board by legislators when you went back and revised your wish list, when it became abundantly clear where we were at with revenue estimates in that December-January timeframe last year. And that very well could happen again. And the fact that you were amenable or responsive to them was was very critical in the overall formulation.
Member Carey, please.
Thanks. Deputy Superintendent Jones, could you, did that goodwill get us anything other than goodwill?
Actually,
and I don't
yeah.
mean that like in a
No, no,
negative.
yeah.
I mean that like in a sincere way. Like, what did that buy us?
Actually, I would say from my vantage point, and this is just my opinion, I mean, quantifiable is difficult, but qualitatively, it probably saved, or probably meant that we got more than we might not have had we not done that. I'll just say that. I mean, I can't speak for the decision-making process that was made, but the fact that you, again, were amenable to that probably meant that we got more than we might have had we not done that. So I do think that there's some credibility to that. That's my viewpoint, my opinion. But had you not been open to making adjustments to that, we may not have ended up as high as we did in the first place. So
I'll share briefly, and I don't know where boundaries are, but one of the chairs is, with the conversation as we were talking about the possibility of reducing or keeping it, as is, there was kind of the comment of it's so ridiculously large now that it's hard to take merit on any of it. So the fact that the board got together and reduced it, at least they could say, okay, they're really focused in. So I think we did ourselves a favor by coming together. I hope that doesn't happen every year. Of course, we'd love to say, yeah, these are our 10 and get it, but everybody had to pull in on this one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if there's no further questions on this, Chair, could I just segue to the other backup item, which is the bill book? And I'm not, what we did is offer this to you in the backups because this provides more granular level detail on the aggregate numbers that I just gave you, right? This really breaks down for you where that ongoing money went and where the one-time money went. But then it also, to my esteemed colleague to my right, shows how much due diligence we take to identifying the bills, the effects on public education of those bills, which ties into your budget and then policy drives money, money drives policy, that aspect too. We have a very good, and I know some people don't like this word, synergetic aspect of it, but it's really works well here in Utah. In fact, so much that other states look at our processes for how they will formulate their budgets in the future, and some have adopted a similar process too with their boards. I know things are a little different in states about elections and different things like that, but anyway, that's that part of it. But yes, you can see in the bill book, which I just really feel that this is a very value add. I carry the bill book with me everywhere I go, to other meetings and things like that, because inevitably I get a question about, well, what does that acronym stand for? And then I can't say it, so then I have to go to the bill book and it's spelled out for me, because we do a good job of breaking out the acronyms. So hopefully you saw the tie-in with the earlier thing. But anyway, okay. All right, I'll move on. Okay. So there is the bill book in there for you. If you want a hard copy, if you don't have I believe that we did distribute hard copy versions to you. I do. I recommend that you take that with you everywhere you go. Tab it, for the important things that, like Vice Chair Wood was saying about, how do we know, how much money is going for what purposes, those types of things. This is a good tool, good resource for you to use, and our staff are very excellent putting together. That's not only policy and budget, but comms team. Everybody's involved in the development of this excellent resource to you. Okay. So with that, let's go back in and focus. So today in Finance Committee, if you recall the timeline I gave you, April, May. Okay, here's where we were at. Again, study session was after the committee meetings this morning. So we were really in no way not trying to be presumptive, and hopefully we demonstrate that in the sense of next month, so two motions were made, three actually. Three motions were made. The first being that first motion that you're seeing up there, so that when we come to you, when Finance Committee comes to you and Chair Davis or Chair or Vice Chair Kelly, whichever one briefs or, provides the update, they'll make these motions for your consideration. So the first one for your consideration is really about this process, right? This about, the aggregate or overall process of what I've tried to explain to you here today. And then subject to that particular motion, we could get into what I hopefully explained and articulated is that start of the process, which starts in Finance Committee. Try to imagine it as or perhaps consider that the Finance Committee is much like PEA, and you as the board are EAC, right? Now, I know you don't control the purse strings, but similar process, right? The Finance Committee starts the process of making recommendations, and then EAC takes it in the legislature. We tried to adopt a similar process here with you, with the Finance Committee and the board, based on, first and foremost, meeting the intent that this is a board-driven determination of what you feel is in the best interest of public education funding for the next legislative session. So these will be coming to you in June. I just wanted to point that out to you because back to what Board Member Bollinger said, between now and the June meeting, you can interface, start talking, do those types of things so that when we get to these particular agenda items, you'll consider that first motion and then the next two motions in there, one for critical FTE needs, as you see there, and then Beverly Taylor Sorensen. But then, you as board members outside of Finance Committee can work with your colleagues in the Finance Committee to see if they want to put something there or you want to just start the process and bring it to the full board. End state. That concludes my briefing or for the study session, subject to any more questions or concerns. I know it's high level. There's a lot of details to it, but those should come out in future iterations of your meetings. So
Grateful for your work on that and for your presentation. Thank you, Scott. Any additional questions before we move on to our next agenda item? Superintendent Dixon. No.
Thank you, Chair Hymas. Some initial communication about budgets is starting to come from the federal government as well. And it's just sort of this skinny budget proposal by the White House. And at this point, again, just these are early proposals. Everything goes through Congress and the budget process, so it could be months down the road. There's a likelihood of Title III being cut. That's in the proposed budget, and that's the program for which we support students learning English. Title I is supposed to be staying intact. IDEA, and again, these are all proposals. IDEA to stay intact but be consolidated into a single grant. And I think it's a
Well, we have a question from member Bogus first, and then member Lear. But let's
just
finish
one more item. An overall let's see, an overall proposal of cut to about $12 billion. It's about 15.3% cut for the Department of Ed. So I wanted to drill down because if, for example, if the board wanted to support looking at our data around students learning English and knowing that Title III money may not be there, that's something to think about in your budget proposals. So I just want to plant that seed. There's some time yet, but we don't know what we don't know. It's just this initial proposal, and I'm just flagging it for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, member Bogus and then member Lear.
Thank you, sir. I know where to find it, but off the top of your head, do you happen to know what our Title III funding is? Because we have a huge chunk of Title III educators. Like solely dedicated Title III educators in this state.
Right.
Yeah.
So can we, once we have that, let's move to member Lear, then once we have that, we'll.
Oh, it's not like at a touch of a button for them?
She's,
Oh, okay, I thought it would be like two
Scott,
clicks of a button for them and 7 for me.
We just need a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, So member Lear?
We're only semi-magical now. On a
You just said in passing, that what you'd heard is that IDEA would be combined into a single grant. Did I mishear you?
I'll read directly from Sir, if I may. This is coming from the School Superintendents Association, but CCSSO, a number of organizations just summarized what is in the briefing, and it reads, the proposal preserves all IDEA grants, but consolidates them into a single program funded at FY25 levels.
And can you just remind me what
What are-
IDEA grants are?
That would be Dr. Voorhees. I mean, I can take a stab at it, but it won't be the full magical answer that Member Bogus is so looking for.
Chair. Deputy Superintendent Leah Voorhees. So currently, we have a preschool IDEA grant, and we send all of it to LEAs. We don't keep any of the funding here for administration. We have a school age, that's what it's called, 6 to 21, ages 6 to 21 grant. That's the majority of the IDEA funding. And we do hold back about $13 million of that $143-ish million. And that funds everything that happens from our office related to special education, all the monitoring, all of the professional learning, the Apple SPED program, all of that. And then we can actually hold back more money than that, but Utah has never taken the full amount allowed at the state level. So we send that back to LEAs. We have a deaf-blind grant that...
in addition to other USDB money.
Yeah, but yes, exactly. They get IDEA preschool and IDEA school age, but then we have a specific grant for students who are deaf-blind that comes through here, and then we pass through to USDB, but as the state superintendent has to apply for that grant through the state special education director. So I'm actually the project officer, but we just send it all straight through to USDB. There are several other IDEA grants that are available. We currently do not have one.
Okay. So just to briefly follow up then, that means there would no longer be a separate pre-K
right.
Grant.
School age.
School age would be combined with that. It would just be all one. Mm-hmm. And even the deaf-blind would be...
I assume so. I mean, that piece of information is so limited, but...
It's right.
But yes, that is the assumption.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get a picture of that. And 25, so we're going back one full fiscal year. I mean, she said at FY...
Based on FY25.
Yeah, the federal fiscal year is a year behind the state fiscal year.
So it wouldn't go. Yeah. It would just.
So it's starting in July.
So it would just hold fast at the current year. Oh
yeah, the current amount.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification.
Scott, do you want to add more?
Well, just to answer the question about how much Title III money we received, if I may, 6.2 million Title III.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights. Oh, Member Carey, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, I was speaking to a board member, Bollinger, on this, and just a question. How, if anything, does that change what we do with the funds? If it's a grant, those funds are dedicated to a particular program. So instead of sending us 3 checks, they send us 1, and we distribute it as, and I'm assuming we've been distributing these funds historically, meaning USBE. So practically, how does that, what changes would our stakeholders see? What changes would we see, I guess is the question, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Chair?
Leah, please.
So it's likely that as far as IDEA is concerned, that if we administered the funding the way we currently do, that our stakeholders wouldn't see a big difference. The funding formula is very complicated, and if we were allowed to decomplicate the funding formula, that is something that our stakeholders would appreciate. There are different parts of the funding formula that are based on 1997 child counts. And so if... I hear a lot of yeses. Yeah. Yeah. So it is very complicated. So that would be beneficial if that was something that we had the opportunity to do.
And I was just thinking how 1997 was a great year.
It was not bad.
17 years old, living my high school dream. It was fantastic.
Oh, geez.
We've got 97 was I was playing basketball every day. I didn't have any adult cares. I thought my parents didn't know anything. You know, it was one of those. It was great. Sorry, remember Lear?
Consistent with what you just said, I know this is really speculative because we don't, but that would also mean that we would not say the X amount must be spent on pre-K. It would be just going to LEAs without any direction, and it could dry up pre-K, or they could spend.
Well, not necessarily, not without any direction, because there is still statute.
Okay,
right?
that's
So,
important.
yes, so the funding, so the way IDEA works, there are different sections of IDEA, and there is an entire section of IDEA that is just about funding.
Okay.
And that's statute. So even if the regulations were pulled back, that still, Congress would have to act to be able to change that. Yes.
Like the pre-K funding.
Right. And then we are still responsible to implement the rest of the statute as well.
So that's maybe less draconian than it sounds, kind of. I mean,
yeah,
we get it in one check instead of three, but the
responsible for
the
a lot.
The law is still in place to have us distribute it to where it, as according to the law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I just
So
really
we've
wanted to
got,
understand that.
yeah, thank you. We've got Scott, and then Vice Chair Wood has a comment, or Vice Chair Hart.
So I just want to just further emphasize that we likely would stay on a reimbursement basis, right? Because it's a grant, then LEAs would still have to quote unquote front the money and then put in for reimbursement, even though it's a, lump, or not a lump sum, but it's all in one grant, so to speak, right? We'd still have to consider those aspects as well, so.
I just can't let the moment pass without saying, people, just randomly constituents or employees or coworkers or something, they get anxious thinking that this means no rules, all, no holds barred. But what it does is it shifts the rulemaking to either the state, to a state, an SEA, or a state legislature. It doesn't mean there's no rules. It means someone else closer to the problem makes the rules. So I get anxious when people say, a block grant means, or they insinuate that means that people can do whatever they want. It doesn't mean people can do whatever they want. It means the rulemaking sits somewhere else. Now, we can argue about whether that rulemaking would be appropriate or not, but the simple fact remains that does not mean that all of a sudden LEAs are going to be written blank checks and they can just do whatever they want. That would give me a sense of unease, and I would feel very anxious about that. But that's not what that means. There's still law, there's still regulations in other places, and it's intended to put the rulemaking somewhere else. I just feel it's important because there's no need to scare the general public. We just got through a pandemic. We don't need to scare people more than necessary.
Member Lear?
Because this is a study session, I'd like to say, I don't believe, Molly, that that's necessarily so. Some of the budget cuts we've seen already are without that kind of direction and protection. And I would like to believe what you're saying. I'm not convinced that some of the changes could not happen with those, whether it's legal or not, with those protections taken away. I think that is what we hope will be the case, or we expect in a lawful society would be the case, but I don't think that's a given. That's my concern. So my anxiety persists. And I think that we just have to, I think some of that's speculation and hopeful, but not necessarily, we don't know. This has not happened before.
Member Carey?
So, and I understand what Superintendent Dixon said. This isn't imminent in the sense that this is going to happen tomorrow, checks in the mail. But I would like to know, and I know Chair, you or Vice Chair Hart have addressed this before, how are we preparing? How are we getting ready so when something does happen, like, are we looking at those options now as a board? Are we mapping that out just generally, or it's not something we can do until we know the specifics?
I've got Scott and Sid, so Sid, well, they're both pointing at each other. Scott, okay.
Well, so to answer the question, I mean, until we know what precisely is the result of congressional action, we are intertwined with or working closely with the legislative staff and the governor GOPB staff to basically do the what if scenarios, right? What if we completely lose this funding? How long would we be able to sustain that program using federal funding? 2, well, what if it does come in a block grant? Those types of things will be happening perpetually until we do arrive at that. I just want to make sure you knew that our attention is on this at all levels, right? That we do it now, but it's still very much anyone's guess as to what will be the ultimate outcome that really does take congressional action. So,
Sid, go ahead.
And I'm going to say something you've heard me say before. I want to say 2 things, actually, but one you've heard me say. The first thing is that there were a lot of cuts to programs this past session. So I would anticipate you all will receive what I've started receiving. I think there's some urgency knowing that I'm leaving, that people want to get on my calendar and talk about, can you help me figure out how to get funding? This program got cut, and instead of serving 300 schools, we're now serving 70. Those kinds of conversations are out there. And these are great programs for kids. It's nothing but goodness. It's just that goodness is a smaller slice of the pie. So that's one thing to be aware of and think about what is necessary to have and what is nice to have. And Deputy Jones and I have had this conversation behind the scenes for almost 10 years, right? I mean, we have these conversations a lot as we approach your list. The second thing that I've mentioned before, and I'll mention again, the more you can be data-driven in your decision-making, the better off you are when you go to the Hill. So when you're taking all these factors that you've been talking about, what does the student outcome data say? Do you need more funding for secondary literacy? Do you need more funding for students with disabilities in a particular area? Do you need more for professional learning for teachers to learn a certain skill? Like, I would just, when you can tell a story that's based on data as a need to have, you're more likely to get that funded as a priority item. So, you know, I'm unleashed, so I'm going to keep preaching a little bit, but that's something I just want to double down on, because your team, have had success with those kinds of conversation on the Hill when they're really based on data.
Okay. Thank you. I think that concludes our study session. We appreciate the conversation, the question and answers. We appreciate all of that. Board members, we'll go to agenda item 8, unfinished board business. And if you remember, we had 2 consent items that were pulled from yesterday and carry over to today. What is before us right now is a motion was made by Member Hart and seconded by Member Booth that the board approve contract for USBE 250075CT primary class DBA Odyssey. So that is the motion before the board. I'm going to just ask, I know we had some questions. Scott, now that you're here with us, can you just give us some information before we take this vote? There were some concerns brought up, some questions that were asked, and maybe if you just take a minute and address this, that would be helpful.
Is there any updates? Is that what you were implying that?
I don't know about update from last night to today, but you can, if you have a question, we'll let Scott go and then we can open it up for questions.
Thank you.
So as of note, my understanding is one of the requests was for us to address particular aspects of Odyssey's or the experience with Odyssey from other states. So I did provide an email response that was actually a response of my inquiry of Odyssey related to those particular states. It was Idaho, Iowa, and Missouri. Subject to any questions and concerns about the email I sent to you that captured Odyssey's side of the response, or story, or and what was put out in the media related to those, I can move on to the next particular request or piece of information related to this contract. I sent it last night. I can't remember. It wasn't too late. It was around maybe 4 or 5 p.m. or yeah.
We'll see.
It was after. I mean, it was kind of in the evening. 6. Okay. All right. Acronyms, time. I don't know. So 6:39. Yes.
Okay.
So we may want to pause there, Chair, just so that anyone who hadn't seen it yet can see those responses that were made. I think what that does is demonstrates to you our due diligence in ensuring that those questions were addressed as part of the overall procurement process and selection of who's in front of you today.
Thank you. I'll ask Member Booth, have you read the responses, Member Booth? Okay, if he's read them and still has a question, we'll move forward. I know others are kind of reading / listening, so Member Booth.
I appreciated all of that additional information, Scott. Thank you very much. I did want to just articulate in written form, which I sent to you and to members of the Finance Committee and our leadership, just what was given to me by State of Idaho individuals in addition to what you mentioned. And I don't say it I don't share it as a means of, well, we shouldn't go with Odyssey. I'm just saying we want to be clear-headed, be open about it, make sure that the contract and your negotiations with Mr. Connors, the president of Odyssey, that all of this information that may have to be taken with a grain of salt. I've heard different things from the governor's office, different things from the Department of Education for the state, different things from the specific individual who was the interfacer for the state of Idaho with specifically the Odyssey people. And they were the first state, and so they were building the plane, as I've used their example, mid-flight. And it got a lot better, but they still ended up going with someone else. So as we have determined, and you have determined that this is the best option, I am totally supportive, just wanting to make sure that we're upfront with Odyssey so that as you progress through the process of working with them, that they're not, there are not surprises, and that you are able to communicate and they are willing to communicate and to fix. So I specifically said, I listed, which I don't need to go over in detail here, specific things that were mentioned by people from the state of Idaho, and Odyssey didn't choose to say that. Of course, they're not going to. That's not, that we're not going to hang out our dirty laundry. But those are things just to kind of put in your brain to watch for as they are taking over on the 15th of May. And the guy from the governor's office specifically said, I think the problems we had with Odyssey were 50% Odyssey, 50% State Office of Education. So I have high hopes, knowing you and knowing the people that represent our Utah State Office of Education, that the communication is going to take place. So it's not going to be a matter of, well, we didn't tell Odyssey what we needed, or that we needed the transparency and the accountability, and we needed, the records to be up to date and accurate. There's the question about the interest on the $120 million in Idaho. They didn't clarify that, and so they didn't know that they were needing to give the interest back to the state of Idaho. And then when it was clarified that yes, they did need to do that, then there was a bunch of questions. And so those kinds of things, I believe, can be overcome, and I think they can provide a tremendous service for us. But I just wanted to be upfront in terms of what I was hearing, so I wasn't feeling, if we had problems down the road, I wasn't feeling like, oh, well, we didn't go into this with our eyes wide open. So I have high hopes for a great program, empowering parents to do the things they want to do for their kids. I just wanted to have that in front of you, those of you that will be following through on the implementation. This is a huge responsibility for you guys. I'm sorry that you just get to add it to your list of things to do without a whole lot of help. One other concern that was mentioned was that in the state of Idaho, they did have an interface person, but that person was also responsible for 4 other states. Now, Idaho was much, much smaller than us in terms of the amount of money to be distributed and awarded. So I'm hoping that whoever they designate is somebody that can really address our needs and not make us number 4 or 5 on the list when you've got a problem that needs to be situated. So those are just cautions, and I am going to be supportive of this recommendation. Just wanted to get that out in the public. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Member Booth.
Sheriff,
Member Vaughn. Go ahead.
So a couple of key takeaways that can segue at your direction, Chair, to respond to board member. Absolutely. I do want to emphasize that you can see that what's different about this particular contract is typically we enter into a 5-year agreement with renewals, right, from there. This is a 2-year contract, and obviously they've agreed to. The reason for that is because of the complexity of these programs, and because we want, to follow the legislative law or intent for the program. Well, we have to. It's the law. We're the contracting entity. What's a lot of is emphasized in here, though, is that the vendor, or should you vote to approve the contract, and then I would subsequently sign it, has really a majority of the responsibility for the success or failure of this program. Our role is just to ensure that they meet the contractual obligation to meet the law and to provide all of the programmatic definitions and policies and procedural aspects. That's why you see references to the handbook that they have to publish, and to bring that further clarity to our parents, who we respect and admire for, and the parents' lead choice, and do those types of things, that it's made abundantly clear to them by the vendor, not by the government, not by the board, so to speak, or whatever terms are out there, but that our role is just as the contracting entity. And should there be, subsequent concerns with, are they following the contract, then absolutely, or meeting the law, and then by not doing so, absolutely, we would, I think we would have that good relationship. We certainly had that with the prior vendor as well. So, and to the questions or concerns about it wouldn't have mattered who the vendor was or is at that time, because of the amount of the change is that were required by the new law that were HB 455. It is highly probable that we would have done the same thing. It wasn't about a particular thing. There's, to terminate for. That's why we have that clause in there, is because it's at our convenience to make sure that everybody too, because again, which was emphasized yesterday, the previous vendor had the opportunity to reapply as well, and I'm a little disappointed that they didn't, but that's their choice. So we do it. We feel, or I feel strongly, that having this as a 2-year contract, which you can see that the vendor has agreed to, allows us that opportunity to relook at things, not from a critical point of the vendor or anything like that, but due to the complexity of this program. It is a difficult task in any state, not just our state, but you can see that when programs first start up, those types of things, that there can be these types of challenges out there. So what do? We maybe need to reset or relook at things and do that. And that's why we've are proposing to you that you approve my signature on the contract for a 2-year contract with options to renew, but it will come up again for review in 2 years. We are also very, very conscientious about where things are at in the legal system. And we feel that the contract facilitates and can be adapted to whatever is decided eventually in the court system. I think that was another question or concern. The wording in there, you can see quite a bit of clarity and specificity on how much we're emphasizing the role of the vendor in administering and meeting the intent of this program as put out in HB 455, which resulted in the applicable codes. So does that help, Chair? So
We're getting a slight head nod, so we're going to say yes. We're going to go Member Bogus, and then Member Earl, and then Member Hall.
Thank you, sir. Superintendent Jones, I'm wondering if there's anywhere in this contract that addresses the interest on that $120 million. It's been brought up multiple times, but I don't have a clear recollection.
Yes. So, Chair, the answer is yes. That'll all be subsequent to the transfer and thing, and we've already put the motions in, or the processes in place for the return of the funding and calculations and those aspects too. So I don't have the exact amounts or those pieces, but yes, we're addressing that. Not so much as part of this contract because it's with a new vendor, but with the transfer from the former vendor to that, and the money will be brought back. Yes. Does that answer her question?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's because that contract would be related to the previous vendor on the processes for return of the funding. So
I guess it doesn't
Thank you.
answer my question then.
It does not?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
So this interest question has come up, and I got a text message about it, but I don't recall reading it in the contract, that if there is interest when this money is transferred to Odyssey, that either we reduce the money we send to them for the program administration and et cetera, and they just keep the interest, or they return the interest to the state.
They would need to return the interest to the state.
Is that written in the contract?
No, not specifically, but it's in the law. So, so by virtue of the fact that they're signing the contract, they're agreeing to follow the law. So that level of specificity is not in the contract, but it's in the law.
So I think in the state of Idaho, it probably was
Member Booth?
Right.
specified in the law.
Right. Right. So they are, so by, yeah, I see what she's asking. So by virtue of the fact that they've agreed to follow the law as part of their agreement with you or with us, then they would need to follow the law for what would result in the interest, accumulated in the return of that to the state. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Member Earl.
For some reason, I think, if I turn it off, that when I turn it on, it's going to go red. I don't know why. I've done that about 3 times today. And I don't know necessarily need a response, but if you want to, you can. I just think some of the biggest complaints or feedback that I've gotten from parents themselves that have received this scholarship was the lack of communication or the inefficiency of communication. To me, and I hope, wherever you are, Odyssey, right, that it's not just a little important. This is kind of a make or break it thing, because parents being able to get timely, right, information from someone, the program manager, and then being able to answer their questions, just having a Zoom meeting over and over and over again, instead of just putting together a fax sheet, right? I mean, I just hope they're more efficient than previously. And I know it was starting up a new program, and that often has those hiccups or whatever, but that's the biggest thing that I've heard from parents, is just that uncertainty, being told one thing and then another, and that changing, and then not really knowing what can or can't be used, which I think most families want to just stay within whatever the framework is. So Odyssey, that's like the biggest concern I have, is making sure there's clear communication, clear engagement with the parents. They've got the questions, answers, and how to do things. And if it's still uncertain, that there's a mechanism and a quick response back. So
Sure.
those are the things. And I did see, it looked like I saw those components in the bill and not in the bill, but when I read through it, I was like, okay, I can
Scope of
see it
work.
here, the scope of work.
Terms and conditions.
Yep. So I'm hoping I think that's a big win for them to successfully do that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I may,
Sure.
Chair, related to that particular point, we've tried to overly emphasize the fact that as part of their overall responsibility, and this would be for any vendor that was chosen, is that we disengage from even the parental liaison that Cassie Hayes has been doing, and emphasize that resolution with the parents has to be directly with the vendor, right? To try to even further demonstrate the direction or intent to remove government, if you will, from the processes and allow the vendor that amount of latitude to meet the contract, but to do exactly what Board Member Earl has described directly with the parents. The how they do that is really up to them. If we find that they're not doing that, though, then it could lead to questions about, breach of contract or thing, because that is, to her point, is also, I think, articulated very well in the law, right? That this is a program that the vendor must ensure is between them and the parents. So, yeah.
Thank you. We've got Member Hall, and then we've got Member Brenton online.
I know we all understand this is a weighty matter. I don't think anybody understands more than Deputy Jones and our staff here at USBE. I don't think anyone's received more complaints than these guys. And so I just want to say I believe, especially with you being, I think you hold a lot of responsibility here. And I think you've taken it very serious. Matter of fact, I think you've been very modest on how you've dealt with Odyssey up to this point. From what I hear, he grilled him up one side down the other. And I'm thankful to hear that, because I think with the experiences that you guys have had up to this point, it's necessary to try to get to a place where we have good faith in the company as we move forward. So we've trusted your leadership, to this point. We continue to trust you in this process and believe that you've done a good, thorough job. It hasn't been really mentioned. I know Leanne sat on a committee, and with this process and helping choose this company, and other people. There were many people involved in this process, to get it to this point. And so I just want to let you know I do support this motion. I'm confident as we move forward, and trust your leadership that we're making a good decision here. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Member Brenton?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for all the extra information and clarification. And I haven't had a chance to dive into the policy book yet. I'm just wondering, is there a fact sheet on the UFA for us as board members? And does Odyssey have their own policy analysts that will be diving in to make sure they're in compliance with the law? I feel like with the UFA, I know, or the scholarship, that it's about parental rights and having the freedom, but we have so many guidelines for charter schools that they have to jump through and report. And is there going to be a process for the parents? And are there changes in the law from this year that we can see on reporting, and what is acceptable to be paid for and what is not?
Yes,
Scott,
Or
please.
is that not really our purpose? So.
No. So the answers to all of her questions are yes, with a little bit more specificity as it relates to they did demonstrate and ultimately led to the selection that they have those capabilities as you have described, to be very clear on what qualifies as a reimbursement, to be very clear on all these aspects that the board member just described, right? So the key though is they're not technically available because we don't have a contract yet in place. So I would say that should you, if I sign the contract, that you would see that I feel confident that you would see those types of things from the vendor. Does that help answer her question?
Member Brenton?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Member Carey?
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Jones, thank you for providing the information you did yesterday, and it did answer several of the concerns I had, and those regarding accountability. But I have one question that I'm still struggling with, and you may have, you may be able to answer it, you may not be able to. But I had heard the same thing that the board member Hall did. I think we were together at the time, but that you really put Odyssey through a military-type bunk inspection. But my question is this: why would any organization want to take over a program that was just declared unconstitutional, has probably a year to go administering this program under that cloud of uncertainty? I can't understand that, and I don't know if that came up in your discussion with them, or if you have some thoughts on that. But if you could address that.
Sure. Through the chair, timing. At the time we were vetting and I just would like to clarify for everybody that I am equally mean to all vendors, right? I do not. I am mean. I am, and it was not just Odyssey. I would put anyone through it. You ask any vendor for anything, SISs, whatever. I am equally
thorough,
mean to them.
Yes. Thorough.
So, in case that comes up in a court thing or something. Anyway, related to the specific question that Board Member Carey asked, at the time it wasn't clear what the judge was going to, whether there would be a stay thing. So timing wise, the process had taken place to do the recommendations. So my answer is, I think that's a question that's better answered by the vendor, right? I mean, if you look at the date that the CEO or president of it signed, it's well after the clarity was provided by the court system that, you know, a stay, if I'm doing the legal terms right, a stay was granted subject to the appeal process and then ultimately what the Supreme Court decides. So I believe they're well informed of where things are at currently in the judicial system. But I really do feel that your question, Board Member Carey, through the chair, is better answered by the vendor, not by me. That's their decision, but I do believe it was an informed decision to enter into this contract based on the date that the president signed for thing. Does that help answer the question?
It does. Chair, a follow-up. So, to the best of your knowledge, is there any hold harmless or provision in the contract that addresses if the program is deemed unconstitutional, would Odyssey be made whole or reimbursed for any costs that they incurred? Are you aware of any type of provision like that?
Up to that, through you, Chair, up to that point, up to the date that, and you know, it very well could be, and I'm trying not to guess what the Supreme Court will do, but if it was ruled that it was unconstitutional, then I would assume that there would be an order from the court on when to stop, you know, sensations, cease and desist, whatever, or, you know, or perhaps it is as of that date of the decision that the Supreme Court made. I don't know if there would be mitigating circumstances presented by both sides to the Supreme Court, either prior to or after the decision of the court, but pretty much the parameters are that up to the point where it's very clear that this is the last date of the program related to whatever decisions are making. Again, I can't, you know, I'm not sure I can speculate on when that would be and what the conditions of it would be. If it's just a full stop here as this date, we would make them whole up to that point. But it really does depend on what the order is. The timing of it could be, we could be at the end of a fiscal year, we could be at the beginning of a fiscal year. So it's difficult for me to say that they would be held whole or to promise that in a public meeting, because I just don't know what I don't know, and that is what are the conditions of the determination or the ruling by the court. I hope that helps. I don't know if I could be any more specific than that we would provide up to the point where the program ends, you know, to make them whole. But beyond that, I just could not speculate or conjecture.
No, I understand that. Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to publicly humiliate Molly. She said, I can't hold it anymore. I thought we were going to vote. I got to step out, and now we have to pause. Okay. Member Green.
I'll fill the time with something maybe outside of this, but it has to do with some parents that might not have been reimbursed for some of their things from the ACE program before that went out. If you could email me or direct me to who I could talk to, I do have a couple of families that are needing to ask those questions on reimbursement.
Chair, if I may. Yes, absolutely. But I think this is important for everyone to note. It's a value add to this that I feel confident that ACE has recorded or it will provide us data on where it stands with reimbursement process and appeal processes for existing customers. Now, does that, I can't guarantee that one particular family might not be on that list right now, but by all indications at this point, there should be a pretty good transition of information, always in the interest of protecting identity, PII, of what, where we currently stand, where families currently stand with ACE's perspective on their reimbursement requests, transferring over, should you, not being presumptive, should you approve the contract, and then they start on May 16th, that there would be that follow-up to reimbursements from the prior year or from this year. But yes, I can email you individually, board member, to do that, board member Green, to do that through the chair. So.
And follow up.
But yeah.
And I think it's safe to presume that ACE will cover those expenses and not Odyssey, correct? Like that
Well,
would
the-
fall, because it falls
Sure.
within the contract of when ACE was overseeing the program.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Chair, if I may, well, so the answer is, well, the funding covers it. The timing of it though, so we have to get, this goes kind of back to what, I was talking about earlier, was as part of the transfer of authority between one vendor to the other, the money needs to come back from the previous vendor. Then we provide the funding to the new vendor. They take that data and say yes for the reimbursements to it. Now, if you're asking questions about policy of reimbursements and those things, that's where we'll have to look closely at what the items are for. Too, that would be, to my understanding, up to the new vendor and their interpretation of the law as it applies to that too. So now I don't want parents out there going, well, now I'm not going to get reimbursed, or no, I don't know that yet. That has to be part of the transition and working closely from one vendor to the other, giving the data on what the reimbursements are for. And the new law went into effect on March 6th when the governor, I know that there's reimbursements that are still pending from before that.
And that's where this.
So that's where we have to get, I don't want to come across as saying, well, people aren't going to get reimbursed, for that. I believe they will be, but I also have to I'd be remiss if I didn't account for the fact that there is the new law that went into effect on March 6th. We know that there's reimbursements pending from before that, and we know that there's reimbursements being submitted and pending after that. And so because of that new law and the requirements of what can be reimbursed, for example, no more musical instruments, right? That's very specific in the law. So I don't want to speak I don't want to sound like, well, it's going to go bad, but also don't want to make sure that parents aren't saying, well, I'm going to get reimbursed when it might be an item that it does not qualify that they bought or provided after March 6th. Is that fair, or,
Yes,
from the vantage point? It all will matter, and we did try to articulate that the two vendors have to work together to ensure as much clarity and in the transition, right, to facilitate the process. So ultimately, though, it is the funding that will be used for reimbursement on that. Yeah.
Yeah, any information that I could pass along to them, that if there's direct contacts that I can direct parents to, or websites, or just to help extend that help to them would be awesome. Thank you.
I think we're getting beyond the contract, but
okay,
you know what I mean? Yeah. So.
Well, I think that's
Molly.
important because it does go to the conditions of the contract. What she's asking, Chair, is pertinent to the contract, and it gives me just another opportunity to emphasize that should the board pass the contract and I sign it, it will be incumbent upon the vendor to communicate with those parents directly, without us facilitating that, how the process will work for reimbursements.
Perfect.
I do plan on being equally mean about the whole thing, okay?
Does that help, Emily?
No, and
Does that help?
honestly though,
Okay.
I do say that, but I think you all know that we as staff and you as the board, we are very interested in making sure that the parents get served. It's unfortunate that there's been some issues out there, but by gosh, we're really trying to do what's right in the interest of the parents. But we really have to emphasize that it's really incumbent upon the vendor to do so by way of the contract, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Looks like we have a final comment from Member Lear.
And my concern would be that was the point of this program as it was developed by the legislature. The board approves the contract. Then the parents and the parents' role is then with the vendor. And it's not your role to facilitate, and I know it's really hard for sometimes elected board members and certainly for educators that I know to not, it's hard. You say you're mean and harsh. I've seen every educator they want to help, they want to be facilitators, but it's not our role.
Right.
It's their role to work with that vendor, the parents, and get what they need. Otherwise, we are overstepping, the board and the board staff are overstepping our statutory role in this program.
Chair, and if I may, and hopefully Board Member Lear, based on what I've said, what you've read and reviewed in the contract, you can see that I am further emphasizing that, is that the vendor has to own this, and that our role will be just that, is just the enforcement of the contract, and that it's made abundantly clear that they own this going forward. So much so that I've made it very clear that we will disengage from the parental liaison after the transition occurs. We want to help along what Board Member Green was, Cassie and I'll continue to work, try to, because there's parents that are concerned that perhaps their applications didn't get processed far enough and those types of things. We will still try to do that to facilitate the transition. Once they start, though, once that's done and we have those pieces in place, it will be incumbent upon the vendor to own this and to directly liaison, communicate, support, all those types of things with the vendor. I do understand the intent.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate that. Thank you, board members. Let's queue up this vote then. The motion before the board is that the board approve the contract with Primary Class DBA Odyssey. Let's go ahead and vote. Member
Brenton's a yes.
Member Brenton's a yes. Member Reel?
No, member.
Real is a yes.
She got back on.
Reel's a yes.
Just now.
Member Kelly, I believe, had to drop off. Board Member Davis, are you with us? Okay. So this passes 12 in favor, 1 in opposition, that being Member Bogus. Thank you, board members. We do have one additional contract that was pulled from the consent calendar. Do we have anybody who's willing to make a motion in either direction here? Member Bogus?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would move that we approve the remaining items in the consent calendar. I forget the name of that contract offhand.
Well, the motion is to approve any remaining items. Do we have a second? Second. Is there any opposition online? Seeing none, that concludes the consent calendar, and we'll continue on. I just want to give a brief chair's report. There was a event that the USBE put on called Principalooza, and it was the first year. I'd rather, Sid, if you just take like 1 minute, 30 seconds, I don't know, concise, but I want to talk about it because it is new, and this was an opportunity to get principals. Usually we don't have a lot for principals specifically, but it was a great event. It could have been better. Molly and I presented, so they'll get better presenters next year. But yeah, but Sid, will you just talk about that for a second? I just will say, I know you're going to talk about it, and hopefully I don't take what you're. We had great representation. I don't know the exact number, but we had district principals, we had charter principals, we even had a private school principal or two. I met one, but it was very nice to see them come together and have an event for them and to work with them. So, Sid.
And thank you, Chair Hymas. So, Chair Hymas I get to say this about him. He kicked off the event. There were about 300 principals, first time, and we had a number of staff there who were not only responsible for putting it together, but everyone showed up to support their peers. I think we had about 70 staff members there just helping behind the scenes. So a couple of things. One, Chair Hymas started us off just right and was so personable with all of the attendees. It was so interesting to see their body language. You know, you could just tell they were tired. It's the end of the year, and if you've ever been a school principal, it's exhausting this time of year. And within minutes of Chair Hymas being so personable with them and welcoming them, you just saw their affect change. You know, their eyes lit up and they were open. And so throughout the day, They heard from each other, they heard from staff members, and then we had poster sessions so that they know more about what USBE does. So between sessions, lunch, there were times for them to learn more about CTE and learn about child nutrition. And so that's why we had a lot of staff there, because they were there to show the services that we provide. So it was a proud mama moment, but I was equally as proud for our board members who were there and participated by presenting. It was a great day.
Thank you, Superintendent. Superintendent, should be pointed out, Superintendent was the keynote, did a fantastic job, as we thought she would. And then Rich Nye from the Governor's Office spoke right after lunch, which was great as well.
Can you just mention the staff members that headed that? I know it was a huge group effort, but there were some lead folks. Can you mention who they were? It was.
I will miss somebody. I'm worried.
Okay.
The primary.
Go ahead.
Primary of our leadership team. So we have a whole school improvement team and leadership team. Quinn Kellis was the MC, and Julie Lundell had a lot to do with it. But they had a team behind them. But I would say, pointing out Katie Hill, Quinn, Megan, a whole team. And I hate to name because I'm sure I've missed a bunch, but those were some of the key people. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic event. Thank you. Let's do board member comments. Member Bogus.
I'm very excited. So I'm going to bring this a little closer so I don't lean in and look goofy. I work with two individuals, and I just want to give a shout out to them. They work in a building. Their names are Kaylee Heyer and Emily Langdorf. And they work in a building that has typically had staff retention of about 30% a year. There's a very, very, very high turnover in this building. And we've worked together now for a decade. And as a specialist, you can almost see a teacher's evaluation just by the students that come through your classroom. Because some groups come in and they have exceptional transferable skills. And some groups come in and they just don't have the same skill set. And these two ladies have head on taken on some of the most challenging situations, some of the most challenging students, and we have worked really hard together this term on their cohort of students, and they have done such profoundly excellent work. It stands out in a way that I really felt prompted to bring it up, to tell you, to tell this state, that those two women deserve not just an award, they deserve the highest of accolades for their effort, their perseverance, their grit, their tenacity, and their work toward excellence in education in this state. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Christina. Carol?
I meet, as part of my assignment to work with UHSAA, I meet with that body about every other month. And every time I do that, the director, Rob Cuff, says, is there anything that you would like to bring from the board to this body? And so far, it's only been twice. I've not had anything specific and just said, I think the board's supportive of UHSAA. We value your partnership and the work you do. And thank you for the great, thank you for how much your programs add to, well, they're all our programs, but they add to student experiences. So I just wanted to then pass on to you, if there is anything, I have a meeting next Tuesday, if there is anything that you think would be helpful for UHSAA, the High School Activities Association, which you know covers, it also covers music programs, debate programs, a number of activity programs. If there's anything that you've heard concerns about or that you'd like that group to know, they're very receptive, both the directors and the board members who are local board members and local employees. They would love to make this a successful relationship so that there are not complaints or threats or wherever else from on high.
Thank you, Carol. Do you have a comment to that?
Yeah.
Okay, Member Booth, you're on the docket, but what do you want to do? You want to kick him out?
I'll close out this one. I'm going to be
Okay.
that person and extend the meeting. It is very much a, I can't even call the word. I would like to see the divisions drawn in a way, or the regions or whatever, that transportation isn't the tail that wags the dog on scheduling and competitions. I understand we've got to be ultra fair because of school size, but we're losing the forest for the trees, and that whole region, how it's decided, and it needs to consider distance more prominently than it already does.
Are you talking region or?
Right. I don't want everybody having to drive all over the state just to find a school within 3 students of, like, they're grouped by size, so somebody has to go. Right, but I think distance needs to have a higher priority than size.
Member Booth. Randy, go ahead.
Thank you. I was able to attend a 2-day workshop with USBA down in St. George last week, and they were in the middle of planning their annual conference, leadership conference, for new board members across the state in your local board areas. This board of directors is comprised of 19 board members from individual districts and from multi-districts where the population of students, you can only be an individual district if you are 20,000 students or more. And then those that are less than 20,000 are grouped together geographically. So it's a representative body, and they had quite a discussion about their desire to strengthen and get better acquainted with all of you. And they were talking about you by name, and, well, I haven't really met this person, or I really enjoy the interaction that we have. And I, as I was listening to the agenda for this leadership conference, which is going to be held September 25th through the 27th at Bryce Canyon at Ruby's Inn. And I believe that we could access some of the funds to pay for your transportation, to get down there, the hotel, the meals, and all of that. But this will be training and a chance to interact with not only the board of directors, who are your direct contacts with your individual districts or your groups of districts that you represent, but it would also be any new board members who have just been elected and are beginning their journey as board members. I think it could be, and particularly for some of us who have not had a lot of local board experience, it could be a fun opportunity to get better acquainted with building better boards and what boards are being taught in these kinds of leadership sessions, so they can understand their function and how they serve more productively in their local boards working with district personnel. So I just wanted to open up the invitation. There's limited space, and they're opening it up, though, to any of our board that might want to participate. Though in individual boards, you can only come from your local board if you are a newly elected board member, just starting out your experience. So they're happy to take old or new from the state board, and if you'd like to go, we can provide you with contact information, or we can possibly work through Sybil, as we do with lots of other conferences, to help get this organized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. With that, I would seek a final motion. Sounds like a motion to adjourn. Second has been made. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
We got one opposite. That carries. We're adjourned.